Drug addict Nicholas Nick Clark wakes up in an abandoned church where he slept after taking drugs. Nick is looking for his girlfriend Gloria in a room that seems to be abandoned. Ahead, he hears a man screaming. Discouraged by the blood splattered on the walls, Nicholas finds a corpse with a severed neck. Nick then finds Gloria, who bites the dead man's face. When Clark calls her, she turns around and starts chasing him. Nick escapes from the church and runs out onto the road, where he is immediately hit by a car. As passersby approach to help Nick, the camera turns to show Los Angeles, full of everyday life in a pre-apocalyptic world. Madison Clark is going to work, and her daughter Alicia is not in a hurry and is sitting in the bathroom. Madison's fiancé, Travis Manawa, answers the phone and tells her that the hospital called and that Nick was hit by a car. Madison, Travis, and Alicia arrive at the hospital to see the young man. A man is brought to the bed next to Nick. At this point, he is questioned by officers who want to know why he fled, and say that when he was found, Nick was raving about seeing blood and entrails in the church. Madison enters the room and orders the investigators to leave, to which they agree. Travis gets a call from his ex-wife Lisa, who asks him if he can take his son Chris with him for the weekend, despite the fact that the young man himself does not want to be with his father. Travis returns to the room and meets Madison. She says that she needs to find a rehabilitation facility where Nick is not known, and that she has a college consultation today. Travis offers to leave Nick with him and says that Madison should hurry. In the car with Alicia, Madison assures her that Nick will be fine. They arrive at the school, and Madison meets the principal Art Costa, who informs her that many students did not come because of a new illness. Student Tobias goes through the metal detectors and they are triggered. Madison checks his pockets and takes him to her office, where he pulls out a knife. Clark threatens to expel him, but Tobias begs not to expel him, stating that he is safer with the gun. When Madison asks what this means, he explains that the new disease that is spreading is something else, and that the infected are attacking other people and eating them, and that the disease will spread. Madison doesn't believe him and tells Tobias to stop reading fake news articles on the internet. Then she escorts him out. At the hospital, Nick wakes up from a nightmare, and it is noticed by Travis, who decides to ask him what really happened at the church. Nicholas tells Travis that he saw Gloria eating people at church and how she chased him, causing him to be run over by a car. Travis assumes that it was a drug-induced hallucination, but Nick insists that this is not the case. That evening, Travis goes to the church to check Nick's statements. The building seems to be abandoned, with traces of the former residence of drug addicts. While he is exploring the room, a man jumps out at Travis, screaming in fear and begging not to kill him, and then he runs away. Travis shouts after him and tries to follow him. When he reaches the main room, he slips and falls to the floor, revealing a pool of blood and pieces of flesh. Startled, he immediately leaves the building. The next morning, Travis and Alicia return to the hospital. Manava informs Madison about what he saw at the church last night. She dismisses his concerns, concluding that this is a drug den and that bad things are happening there. Madison and Alicia are leaving for school. Later, over the football field, Alicia and her boyfriend Matt hug and plan to meet at the beach later in the evening. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Nick expresses concern about an elderly patient in the bed next to him. But the nurse visiting Nick assures him that the man is fine and gives Nick a potty. He asks her to untie at least one strap that binds him, to which she agrees. As soon as she leaves to give him some privacy, Nicholas tries to free himself. But at the same time, the elderly patient next to him becomes ill. The emergency team tries to resuscitate him, but they fail, and the man is carried down to the morgue. In the confusion, Nick manages to untie himself and escape from the hospital. Madison and Travis return there and discover that Nick is missing. They try to ask the nurse where he is, but she is too busy making phone calls to help, and instead tells Madison to report Nick's disappearance to the police. Travis then takes Madison to the church where Nick was staying. After that, Madison and Travis visit Nick's friend Kelvin. They ask him if he knows where Nick is. He replies that he can't tell them, but offers to make some calls to see if anyone else knows where her son might be. Friends, mini pause. Activity on the channel is dropping, so I really need you. Pause this video, put a like and write any comment. This will allow my video to get into YouTube recommendations. Thank you and enjoy your continued viewing. In the late afternoon, Alicia comes to the beach to meet Matt, but he does not come, and she leaves there in disappointment. When Madison and Travis drive home on the highway, they get stuck in traffic. They witness helicopters flying over their heads and police cars passing nearby, which arrive at the scene of what Travis believes is a routine accident. Ahead, they see plumes of smoke from a wrecked car, an ambulance, and several police cars. They hear several gunshots, and Travis insists that they leave immediately, and they take another road home. The next day, even more students are missing from school. In the staff lounge, employees, including Travis and Madison, crowd around a tablet computer playing leaked footage of the incident on the freeway last night. The footage was shot from one of the helicopters, and it shows how the supposedly deceased man bites a lifeguard who is nursing him on a gurney. The police beat the man with batons until he could not stand up, and after that the police shoot the man several times in the chest, and he falls to his knees, and then gets up again. Travis and Madison leave the room, and she tells him to call the police to help find Nick. In class, Alicia and two friends watch videos on their smartphones and see that the man falls only when he is shot in the head. They are arguing whether the footage is real. Principal Costa announces that it will be a shortened day and that students can go home. Madison picks up Alicia, informing her that people are concerned about the shooting that occurred on the road. She tells Alicia to take the bus home. Outside, Madison spots Tobias on the bus. She smiles at him, but he looks away with a grim expression on his face. Meanwhile, Nick meets Kelvin, whom he had previously called, wanting to know if the drugs he bought from him were spiked with anything, as a potential explanation for what he saw at the church. Nick breaks down, and Kelvin is offended by his accusations, but offers to help him. Later, they drive to the river, and the dealer gets out of the car, after which he takes something out of the trunk. He opens the door to Nick, who sees the gun in Kelvin's pocket. He tries to grab his gun, which starts a fight. After a brief struggle, the gun discharges, and Kelvin is shot in the stomach, quickly bleeds out and dies, and a stunned Nick runs away from the scene. Madison and Travis find Nick after he calls the second one. He tells them that he knows where Kelvin is lying, but when they return to the scene, he is no longer there. The three of them get into Travis' car to leave, but when they return back through the tunnel, Travis and Madison see Kelvin's figure behind them, now converted, his clothes soaked with blood from his wound. Travis and Madison get out of the car and approach Kelvin, concerned about his well-being, but he tries to aggressively attack them. But Nick gets behind the wheel of the car, turns her around and runs over Kelvin. To their surprise, Kelvin is apparently still alive and gets to his feet with a bloody face and a broken arm. Nick knocks Kelvin down again, crashing into the hood of the car before slamming on the brakes, sending him crashing onto the concrete of the river bottom. Madison and Travis rush to the bottom of the river, where they find a severely mutilated Kelvin, still alive and holding out his hand to them. Madison asks what's going on, to which Travis claims he has no idea.
Travis and Madison realize that Nick was right and that he's not crazy. The world has gone crazy. Alicia comes home to her boyfriend Matt, but the door is wide open, the house is a mess. Then she finds Matt bitten, who already has a temperature of 39.4 and a fever. Alicia, not realizing the danger, tries to help Matt and wants to send him to the bathroom, but she can't even touch him because he is in pain. At this time, Madison, Travis, and Nick return home at full speed and decide that they will leave the city. Travis calls Elizabeth and tries to find out where Chris is and says there is no time to explain. Madison calls Alicia and tells her to pack everything she needs and be ready to leave. Alicia talks about Matt's illness. Nick turns on the radio, where they talk about the frequent cases of shooting and strange behavior of people, but no one says anything concrete. They arrive at Matt's house. It soon turns out that Matt Cushion. Madison and Travis persuade Alice to leave with them, but she categorically refuses and wants to stay with her boyfriend. But Matt says his parents are coming soon, and Alicia has nothing to worry about, so she goes with her parents. Then all four of them still go home. We leave it alone. When they arrive home, they see the Cruz's neighbors celebrating their daughter's birthday. Joanna tells that no one came to the party because of illness, but invites the Clark family to visit. Nick becomes ill due to the abrupt cessation of taking drugs, and Madison goes for medicines. Travis goes in search of his son. Alice is left alone in Nick's care. Travis arrives at his ex-wife's house and finds out that Chris is simply not at home. On the phone, he learns from Chris that he is in the center of a riot against the police, which was staged by ordinary passers-by who watched the police shoot and kill a zombie homeless man. Not realizing that the victim was dangerous and infected, the crowds think that the police killed an unarmed man and completely lost their temper and start protests. Chris is at the center of these events. Louise turns on the TV and finds out the street where it all happened, and she and Travis go in search of their son. When they arrive there, they still find Christopher, and the police shoot another zombie girl. After that, larger-scale riots begin. All three take refuge in a nearby barbershop. At this time, Alicia tries to break the promise she made to her mother and goes to Matt when Nick begins to break down and vomits on the floor, and Alicia has nothing to do but stay at home. Madison returns to an empty school in search of supplies. In the principal's office, she finds the keys and unexpectedly meets Toby's, who comes to school for the same purpose. They're taking supplies. Toby shares his thoughts that everything that is happening is the end of civilization, but Madison still believes that everything that is happening will end soon. Returning the keys to the offices, and suddenly they hear strange moans on the radio. Toby's learns that these sounds are made by someone infected. They run out into the corridor and see a zombie Artie. He goes to Madison, but Tobias, who is more informed, respectively, is more aware of the danger, tries to protect her and starts stabbing Artie, but it does not harm him and he attacks Tobias. A struggle begins, and they roll down the stairs. Madison takes out a gas cylinder and kills the infected Artie. Maddie and Tobias leave school. Madison drives Toby's to his house and offers him and his family to join them and go out of town together, but Tobias convinces that he will be fine. Madison returns home and gives Nick the drugs. At the barbershop where Travis' family is hiding, they meet the family that owns the salon, Daniel Salazar, his wife and daughter, Griselda and Ophelia. Travis calls Madison and says they're stuck in the middle of a riot. Alicia and Madison watch from the window as the zombified Peter, their neighbor, attacks another neighbor, and she screams all over the street. Alicia runs out into the hallway and wants to help her, but Madison stops all attempts by Alicia and closes the door. Meanwhile, the riots become even more widespread and the sheer horror begins. At Salazar's barbershop, Travis, Lisa and Chris are waiting for the riots on the street to subside. Chris grabs the razor, to which Daniel tells him to put it back. While Travis and Daniel are discussing what to do if Haas gets inside from outside, Chris touches the wall and tells the group that the walls are getting hotter. They realize that the neighboring building is on fire, and they need to escape. When they open the door, several rioters enter the premises to loot and burn the business, ignoring the six as they leave unharmed. Out on the chaotic streets, Travis, Lisa and Chris watch as a zombie policeman deals with a riot policeman lying on the ground, and no one pays attention to this creepy scene. They carefully make their way through the riots and decide to get to their truck as the police have flooded the area. As they make their way through the scaffolding, firefighters point a hose at the rioters on the scaffolding, causing them to collapse and clamp Griselda. The five pull her out and put her in the truck. They decide to take her to the nearest hospital for emergency treatment. Arriving at a local hospital, they see that the area is cordoned off by armed police, who surround the building and shoot infected patients coming out of it. They hear on the radio that a state of emergency has been declared in 11 states and that the National Guard is called to deal with the unrest. All flights have been suspended to contain the spread of the virus. Lisa suggests they go to another hospital, but Daniel says that the others will most likely have the same problem, and asks them to go with Travis to his residence, where he will call his cousin to pick up the family. As they drive to Madison's house, they witness electricity being cut off in the city and fires burning in the darkened streets. Meanwhile, Nick, Alicia and Madison are trying to pass the time while waiting for Travis to return. After a short game of Monopoly, Nick raises the question that Travis may not return home. Alicia warns the family that something is happening on the street, when suddenly they start knocking and scratching at the door in the backyard. Nick opens it and discovers a German Shepherd dog, a coat that is stained with someone's blood. They take him into the house, and the dog starts barking furiously at the front door. Nick looks out the window again and sees the animated corpse of Peter Dawson on the street, stumbling towards their house. Nick remembers the weapons that their neighbors have, and they leave the house to go after him. They enter Patrick and Susan Trent's house, which turns out to be empty. They search the house and find a shotgun and some cartridges that they use. Alicia looks through the curtain and tells Madison that someone has entered the house. Through the window, they see the infected Dawson eventually killing the dog. They keep looking and sees a car that comes to them. Madison realizes it's Travis, and they quickly leave to warn him that there's a dead man inside. Travis arrives at Madison's house, accompanied by Lisa and Chris and the Salazar family. Madison, Nick and Alicia rush to get to Travis before the zombies. Travis discovers a human figure, twisted and making disturbing noises. When the lights come back on, he recognizes Peter, who is eating a dead dog. Travis tries to talk to him, but is attacked. Madison, Nick and Alicia quickly get home, but on the way Nick realizes that he forgot the shotgun cartridges from the neighbors, and Alicia returns for them. There, taking the cartridges, she notices the creaking of the door, discovers the zombie Susan Trent and quickly leaves with the cartridges. Madison enters the house with a gun and is about to shoot when Travis, still trying to restrain Peter's undead, tells her to put the gun down. Daniel takes a gun and, when Travis retreats from the zombie, shoots, shooting off part of the zombie's face, but not killing him. Everyone watches in shock as Daniel shoots a second time and rips the zombie's head off. Chris runs out into the street, as he is sick, and Travis, in disbelief, asks what just happened. Alicia hurries to her house, but gets lost in the maze between it and the neighbor's house. The zombie Susan grabs her, but she manages to escape and reach the fence separating her house and the neighbor's house, but she is grabbed by the zombie Susan when she jumps over the fence. Chris hears her cries for help, pulls her away from the zombies, and they both fall backwards. Alicia is angry at Chris because he grabbed her by the waist during the fall, and she elbows him on the nose. Travis, Madison, Nick and Alicia watch Susan come to life through the fence. Madison claims that she feels bad, and Travis asks if she was bitten. Nick intervenes, stating that she is not sick, but dead. Alicia panics, realizing that the same thing happened to her boyfriend Matt that happened to Susan. After talking about Daniel's cousin coming to pick him up the next day, and Madison's protests about spending the night at the house, Travis goes to get rid of Peter's body. Daniel suggests using gasoline from the truck to burn the body, as he believes the disease will spread from the corpse. Travis refuses, claiming they don't know how it spreads. Returning to the house, he talks to Lisa, who says that when Griselda's leg was crushed, the tissues began to die. And the infection caused by this will spread throughout the body, eventually causing organ failure and subsequent death, and that they can do nothing. In the bedroom of the house, Ophelia tries to convince her father to go with Travis' band, but he refuses. Madison watches the zombified Susan, who is trying to get through a wooden fence. Lisa starts a small conversation with her, in which Madison tells her that if she ever becomes like Susan, she will take care of her so that Travis doesn't have to do it. The next morning, Travis buries Peter and takes out the trash while watching one of his neighbors do it. He sees Daniel teaching Chris how to handle a gun, and is very unhappy, saying to Madison, "You know how I feel about guns." "The gun doesn't care how you feel about it," Daniel replies. Before they leave the residence, Madison says she has one last thing to do. She goes to the fence, which Susan is still trying to get through. She wants to kill her, but Travis tells her that there is a chance that she still has some of her humanity and that a cure is still possible, and she decides to spare her. Daniel, watching from the window, mutters that she is weak. Ophelia still tries to convince him to go with Travis Group, but he refuses, stating that in such situations, good people die first. Griselda supports her husband's actions and says that the two of them have been through much worse. Travis Group is preparing to leave town quickly. He leads the group through the empty streets, with Madison riding behind him. She watches the army helicopters flying overhead and sees Patrick, Susan's husband, who has returned from work. Madison turns the car around and chases him. Travis noticed that Madison wasn't there. Patrick calls Susan, but gets no answer. He finds her revived body and is amazed at its pale, dirty appearance. Despite this and Madison's warning not to touch her, he tries to hug her. The bullet hits her in the head just as the rest of Travis and Madison's group and members of the California National Guard arrive at the scene. Security guards take Madison, Travis and their families away from the scene, while Patrick mourns the death of his wife and is quickly taken away. Soon after, we see that the National Guard is all over the neighborhood, and one of the guards examines the residents of the Madison house and tells them to stay in the house. Madison approaches two security guards to ask where they took Patrick. They ambiguously answer that Patrick was covered in infected blood. One of the guards asks if anyone in Madison's household has been infected, to which she quickly replies no. The guard notices a newly formed mountain of dirt where Peter was buried and asks about it. Madison replies that our dog has died. Meanwhile, Nick hides away from an unknown house and tries to get inside through the window. A little girl from the next house witnesses his actions, scares him and playfully waves her doll's hand at Nick. Nick waves back awkwardly and stops the hacking attempt. Leaving, Nick hears the sound of an airplane engine and a loud explosion and, looking up into the sky, sees a commercial airliner descending and turning dangerously, seemingly out of control. Watching as the National Guard on the streets of the district throws body bags into trucks and draws crosses on the house of the Cruz family, Travis is full of optimism and declares that everything will get better from now on. However, inside the house, Daniel Salazar does not share this feeling and ominously tells his wife that it is too late.
Be afraid of the Walking Dead.
Chris is sitting on the roof of the Clark house, filming and talking about the events that took place 9 days after the arrival of the National Guard. A fence has been erected around the perimeter of the district, creating a safe zone in which a strict curfew is in effect. Since everyone outside the fence is reportedly dead or gone, Chris is alarmed to find a flashing light from a house in the dead zone. Travis is preparing to attend the announcement of Lieutenant Moyers, the commander of the safe zone. Madison is angry with him for playing a man of the people with the soldiers, while she manages the house and the children herself. Chris shows Travis his shots with the light and insists that someone in the dead zone is still alive. Travis rejects this idea and orders Chris to help Madison around the house. Madison finds Nick relaxing in the pool and asks why he missed taking painkillers. Nick assures her that he feels better and doesn't need the pills anymore. Lieutenant Moyers announces that the safe zone is officially free of infection within a 6-mile perimeter. He ignores the influx of questions from anxious residents and reminds them that they are lucky people in one of the 12 safe zones south of the San Gabriel Mountains. After that, Alicia and Ophelia collect weekly rations for their families. Ophelia is flirting with one of the soldiers. Lieutenant Moyers ambushes Travis and asks him to convince neighbor Doug Thompson to undergo a mandatory medical examination. Mrs. Thompson tells Travis that Doug has been acting strangely since the previous night. Travis talks to Doug, who is paralyzed by fear for his family's future. Travis convinces Doug to get tested and assure the family that everything will be fine, regardless of whether he believes it or not. Doug agrees. Alicia wanders around the Tran house and finds a letter in the bedroom. She reads it and cries. Lisa takes care of Hector, a sick patient, in his bedroom. She tells Cynthia, Hector's wife, that she supports his condition with a morphine drip. Nick looks over the fence in the backyard and sees Lisa and Cynthia leaving the house. Later, he sneaks under Hector's bed and pumps out morphine, directing it between his toes. Chris shows footage of Madison flashing a light. Although she was skeptical at first, she eventually agrees that someone may be giving them a signal for help. Ophelia and a soldier, Corporal Adams, kiss in his truck. He tells Ophelia that he could not get the medicine she requested for Griselda, as the military is stocking up on medicines to capture the city. Travis and Madison have sex in their car. Sensing that Madison is still angry, Travis reproaches her for worrying too much about Nick and Alicia's safety. Madison responds by telling him that he should pay attention to Chris and do something about the light signal that Chris discovered. After Travis sarcastically asks if he should tell Moyers about this and ask the soldiers to investigate, she shares her doubts about the military, who did not provide them with any drugs, information, or communication. Maria Thompson is in a panic with her daughters and informs Travis that Duck is missing. Travis promises to find him. The next morning, Madison signals the dead zone with a flashlight from the roof. The same house gives her a response signal. Travis finds Doug's empty car at the perimeter fence. While playing golf, Lieutenant Moyers tells Travis that Duck was taken into custody after soldiers found him crying in a car. Moyers claims that there can't be mentally ill people like Duck in the camp. Travis mentions the light signals and tells Moyers the location of the house. The latter waves him off, insisting that they have already searched the area. Cynthia introduces Lisa to Dr. Bethany Exner, who works for the government. Dr. Exner informs Lisa that Hector has been transferred to a medical facility. She also says that she knows that Lisa is not a real nurse, but praises her nursing skills and asks her to continue helping her. Madison sneaks outside the safe zone and discovers that the streets are littered with corpses, some of them are not infected. She hides from soldiers who, as a precaution, march along the road and shoot corpses. Dr. Exner examines Griselda and recommends surgery at the nearest hospital. Daniel insists on accompanying his wife. Dr. X does not consider Nick, despite the fact that he insists on his frequency. Nick jokingly calls Lisa a drug addict for telling Dr. Exner about his addiction. He hides his panic when he finds out that Hector has been transferred to the hospital, depriving him of access to morphine. At the Tran house, Alicia draws Matt's drawing on her arm with a needle to make a permanent tattoo. At home, Madison tells Daniel that she made her way outside the safe zone and saw dead uninfected people on the street. Daniel expresses his deep distrust of the government, and then asks Madison to look after Ophelia if he and Griselda do not return from the hospital. Madison discovers that Nick has been rummaging through a neighbor's house in search of drugs. She slaps him in a rage and slaps his hands. Nick retreats to the bathroom, and Madison goes to the garage for a drink. The soldiers arrive to take Griselda to the hospital, but push Daniel away. Then they take Nick away against his will. Madison yells at the soldiers and insists that Nick is not sick. Lisa begs Dr. Exner to let Nick stay, but Dr. Exner only encourages Lisa to join her at the hospital. "I love you," Lisa says to Chris, getting into the truck. She tells him that she will definitely come back. Chris angrily hits the window, watching Lisa drive away. Madison looks at Travis and blames Lisa for it. In her room, Alicia rereads Mrs. Tran's letter, a suicide note to Mr. Tran. She describes the horrors witnessed after the outbreak of the epidemic. "What I saw was predicted," she writes. "What I saw was pious, and I think it's overdue." Travis goes to the roof in confusion. He sees someone giving a signal from a house in the dead zone. Douglas Thompson is sitting in a pre-trial detention cell at a local military command post. A fellow inmate dressed in an elegant suit mocks Doug, saying that he is not strong enough to take care of his family, but fortunately his wife is attractive enough to find a man who can do it. The soldiers hear Dag's sobs and take him away. C. Trend approaches Nick, his only remaining cellmate. "So," he says, "who the hell are you?" Back in the safe zone, Ophelia throws objects at the perimeter gate and yells at the soldiers for taking Griselda. Corporal Castro intervenes to restrain her. Adams intervenes and comforts Ophelia, insisting on taking her home. Frustrated, Chris asks Travis how they are going to pick up Lisa. Travis reminds Chris that Lisa tends to help others, so she voluntarily left with Dr. Exner. In the medical department of the command post, Lisa takes care of a patient under the supervision of Dr. Exner. Dr. Exner informs Lisa that Griselda is recovering from the amputation of her leg, but does not answer Lisa's questions about Nikki. Madison finds Susan Tran's suicide note in Alicia's bedroom and realizes that Alicia has returned to Tran's house. She doesn't find Alicia there, but instead finds Daniel and Ophelia in the basement, where they tied Adams to a chair. "That's how we'll bring them home," says Daniel Madison. Adams tries to assure Daniel, Madison and Ophelia that Grizel Dennick will return as soon as they are cured. Ophelia insists that Adams does not know where they are being held, but Daniel interrupts her. Upstairs, Ophelia tells Madison that they can trade Adams for Griselda and Nick. In private, Daniel tells Madison that the exchange will never take place, and informs her of his plan to torture Adams until he gives out information. Madison objects, but doesn't stop him. Travis warns Moyers that other members of the community will revolt if Nick, Lisa, Griselda and other neighbors are not returned soon. Moyers capitulates and orders Castro to prepare his men to take Travis to the command center. Left alone with Adams, Daniel unpacks razor blades, talking about his past in El Salvador, where, in order to survive, he conducted torture interrogations for the military-led government. Adams, in desperation, reports that Grizel Dennick is in a command center 2 miles away, but that's not enough to stop him from being tortured. Driving through the dead zone, Moyer notices an infected woman and orders Travis to shoot her. Travis refuses, and Moyer asks if Travis thinks she's still human. "If that's what you think, then we're just a bunch of murderers," he replies. Travis picks up the rifle, but can't pull the trigger after seeing a sign with the name of the infected Kimberly. Moyers takes responsibility and shoots himself in the head. Dr. Exner discovers bite marks on a newly admitted soldier and orders him to be euthanized immediately. She explains to Lisa that they can't risk leaving potentially infected patients alive, so that they all don't start to recognize the taste of the neighbors. After receiving a distress signal, Moyers and his men drive to a building overflowing with infected. Castro orders Travis to stay in the car. Daniel wipes the blood from his blade after cutting off Adams' arm. Adams begs him to stop. Daniel asks what cobalt means after hearing the code word in Adams' radio broadcast. Alicia finds Chris moping in the yard and invites him to explore the evacuated house of a wealthy family. There she changes into the chic clothes of the owners and admires herself in the mirror. Chris sees her and quickly turns away, embarrassed. Later, they put on a ball gown and a tuxedo and proceed to destroy the luxurious house. In the cell, the guards measure Nick's temperature and detect a low fever. They begin to take him away, but C-Tren convinces Melvin, the commander, to let Nick stay in exchange for chic cufflinks. Nick asks why the Trend saved him. Trend explains that, being a heroin addict, Nick knows how to survive. He shows the key to the camera and asks Nick to help him escape. Stunned, Travis listens on the military radio in the car as the soldiers fight with the infected. Castro returns to the car and informs Travis that they are returning him to the safe zone, stating that Moyers will not come. When Travis reminds him that he was supposed to be taken to the command center, Castro admits that he is fleeing to San Diego, to his wife and daughter. Madison hears Ophelia scream and runs to the Tran house. Ophelia runs out the door in tears. Inside, Daniel laments that Ophelia may never understand that his torture of Adams was necessary for survival. Did he tell us what we needed to know? Madison asks. Lisa finds a dryer with a lot of blood. She decides to go further and find cells for detainees, after which she goes in search of Griselda. She's trying to contact Griselda. Dr. Exner discovers Lisa and tells her that Griselda is in septic shock. Travis finds Ophelia sitting in the yard. Inside, he asks Madison if she knew about Daniel's plan to torture Adams. "Tell me you didn't know," he says. Madison can't answer. In the basement of the trances, Adams tells Daniel that the military locked up 2,000 civilians in a local arena after people started turning over and trampling on each other. Madison arrives with Travis and asks Adams to repeat what he said earlier. Adams tells Travis that Cobalt is the command code to begin the military evacuation from the Los Angeles basin and the humane destruction of the surviving civilians. He says the evacuation will begin at 9 o'clock the next morning. Griselda dies in a hospital room, muttering something about the war and Daniel. Dr. Exner pulls out a pistol with a firing bolt and tells Lisa that traumatic brain injury. The only way to guarantee that dead people won't come back to life, no matter how they died. Dr. Rexner is about to shoot Griselda, but Lisa takes a gun and shoots Griselda in the head. Chris and Alicia begin to see military vehicles with soldiers driving through their neighborhood at night. They notice that the soldiers are not paying attention to what is happening around them. Alicia notices something is wrong. Daniel goes to the arena to confirm Adam's story. Approaching the door, he hears the herd of infected inside growling, pounding on the door. The city of Los Angeles looms in the moonlit night, devoid of any obvious signs of life and light, with the exception of fires raging in entire blocks. A huge horde of infected people is beating on the doors of a nearby stadium. 3 families are preparing to leave their home after learning about Operation Cobalt from Andrew. Daniel wants to kill him, but Travis claims that without him they won't be able to find Griselda, Nick and Lisa at the command post. Travis persuades Daniel to let him take Andrew with him. Daniel tries to reconcile with Ophelia, asking her for help in implementing the plan. She still worries that her father is guilty of torture in El Salvador. He believes that, without talking about it, he was protecting her. In Travis' truck, Andrew begs to let him go, as he knows Daniel will eventually kill him, and Travis agrees. They head to one of the checkpoints and on the way they see a family who is spending an ordinary evening, unaware of the current situation. They get to a checkpoint where there are no soldiers. Daniel opens the gate and all 3 cars pass by. Later, Daniel accidentally approaches a military command post, where he is noticed by 2 soldiers. They argue whether he is a walker, to which one soldier jokingly tells the other that the dead do not use tools, although they suspect that he may be infected. They tell him to stay where he is, otherwise they will shoot him. Daniel tells them to take care of the bullets, and they leave. 2 soldiers notice a herd of zombies and warn the camp about the appearance of infected. The screen shows that Daniel released all the infected from the stadium where they were locked up by the military, and their number is in the thousands. Daniel, Ophelia, Madison, Travis, Alicia and Chris sneak into the camp through another entrance, distracted by zombies. Alicia and Chris stay with the car. Bethany Lisa hears gunshots outside and watches the growing number of infected behind the fences, while soldiers try to weaken them with fire. The medical evacuation is sent without them, assessing the situation as too dangerous, so Bethany tells everyone to go down and join the military evacuation, insisting that she will take care of the patients. When Lisa hesitates, Bethany persuades her to leave with the others, and she reluctantly agrees. In the parking lot, Alicia and Chris discuss what will happen if the others don't come back. Chris notices shadows behind Alicia and they get into the car. Believing that they are infected, they plan to hide until they pass by, but the windows of the car break, and they are forcibly pulled out of it by 3 soldiers. The officer asks Chris for the car keys, as they plan to escape from the scene of the crime, saving their lives. Chris refuses to give them up, and another soldier taunts him, offering to take the 2 of them with him. Chris refuses to comply, and the 3rd soldier takes a step towards Alicia. Chris angrily intervenes, a small scuffle begins, which Alicia stops by announcing that she has the keys and passes them to the soldier. The soldier tries to grab Alicia by the hair, asking if she's sure she doesn't want to go with them. Enraged, Chris steps between them again, and the soldiers quickly surround him. He punches one of them in the face, but the retaliatory blow knocks him unconscious. In the cell with Trend and Nick hear the shots and the screams of the departing soldiers and decide it's time to leave. Trend is looking for the key to their camera, but can't find it, and Nick says that he stole the key from him, which impresses Trend. They leave the cell and, at the insistence of the Trend, pass by all the other prisoners, demanding that they too be released. Nick asks Trend where they are going, to which he replies that they are going to get to the transport and find Abigail. They run through the door in which the sensor is triggered. After going through the door, they discover a zombie devouring Melvin, the officer with whom C. Trend was bargaining in the pre-trial detention cell. The C. Trend goes to him, much to Nick's concern, but he assures him that the infected are slow. STRD picks up his cufflinks. Melvin asks to be euthanized, but Trend coldly responds, "You're already on your way to it." The infected break in, the SD takes the gun from the dead soldier, and they retreat. Lisa leaves the building and watches the evacuation of the military. Soldiers shoot down a huge horde of infected people huddled against fences, while other people get into military vehicles and helicopters. She approaches one of the evacuation helicopters and is offered a hand to get on board, but after a short pause she refuses. At this moment, a gap appears in the fences, and walkers begin to seep into the territory. She watches as soldiers with special forces try to contain the breakthrough, but they are overpowered. One of them is brutally bitten on the neck, and he desperately tries to get into the helicopter, but they won't let him in when the soldiers realize that he is infected. He runs to the back of the helicopter and kills himself with the propeller blades to avoid being revived. Due to the huge number of infected people, the fences do not stand up, and they begin to penetrate inside. The tower also topples over, and the soldiers who were on it quickly die. Realizing that containment failed, the surviving soldiers retreat, as more of them fall into the hands of walkers. Lisa runs back into the building. While inside, the four go to the cells, where they are shocked that there are people inside. They ask Nick and Griselda, and one man asks them if it was a boy with a man in a suit. They realize it's about Nick, so Travis frees everyone with his rifle. With Trend and Nick running from the infected back to the door through which they entered. They can't open it because they unknowingly activated the locking mechanism. C. Trend is trying to open other doors, but it can't. Zombies are getting closer and cutting off their escape route. Nick notices Madison and the others on the other side of the door, considers their situation hopeless and tells his mother to leave. However, Lisa reunites with the group and barely manages to save them by using her card to bypass the system and open the door. The group makes its way to the kitchen and dining room, where it fights off new infected. After walking through the dining room, Daniel asks Lisa where Griselda is. Lisa can't answer, and Daniel realizes that Griselda has passed away. Ophelia is trying to come to terms with her mother's death and wants to get more information. She says she wants to see her mother, to which Lisa replies that there is nothing else to look at. Trend tells Madison that he has a house on the water with supplies. As they pass through a parking lot filled with the remains of the infected, Ophelia and Daniel watch them, believing that Griselda's remains are among them. In the parking lot, Madison and Travis find Chris and Alicia, who inform them that the soldiers took their SUV while they were away. Andrew appears and points the gun at Daniel. Ophelia tries to convince him to put down his gun, but instead he shoots her in the arm. Enraged, Travis knocks Andrew to the ground and begins to beat him brutally and mercilessly until Madison manages to get him to stop. He gives up and walks away, putting his hands on his truck and shuddering, shocked by what he has done. After this incident, the group seizes their remaining cars and heads back to Los Angeles, which seems to be completely abandoned. Madison asks Trend for instructions, and he replies that there is no need to go on the freeway or to the city center. He advises her to go left to the river and follow the path. Large fires have engulfed entire neighborhoods throughout the city. They get to the house from the Trend, which disables the security system and lets them in, offering them food if they want. Nick tells Madison that it seems to him that he has lived in the current situation much longer than the others, and that they have just caught up with him. Lisa gives Daniel some medical supplies, informing him that Ophelia's wound is clotting and that the tissue needs to be changed regularly. Daniel thanks her and Lisa hugs Chris before leaving. Madison runs after her, and Travis, noticing Madison leaving, also follows her. On the balcony, Trend tells Nick that they can't stay, because in order to survive, you need to make crazy decisions. He suggests Nick to look through the telescope, and Nick finds Abigail, who is a yacht off the coast. Madison continues to follow Lisa. She asks her why she went so far, and Lisa discovers a bite wound from one of the infected, which she received when they ran through the kitchen. She hands her the gun, reminding her of their promise and that Travis will be heartbroken if he has to do it. Travis shows up and asks what's going on. Madison tells him that she has a bite wound and Travis says they can save her, but Lisa tells him that antibiotics are not helping. Completely confused, heartbroken, Travis asks Madison for a gun and shoots Lisa. Everyone hears the shot. Alicia and Chris are looking for the source, and Nick and Trend are wondering where it came from. Chris finds Lisa's body and starts crying, and Travis, heartbroken, falls to his knees on the beach and Madison comforts him. Standing on the beach at Victor's house with Trend, Madison watches the bombs fall in the distance. Trend directs the Zodiac inflatable boat to his yacht Abigail, on board of which is Nick, Alicia, Ophelia and Daniel. Back on shore, Madison and Travis prepare supplies for transportation to the yacht. Chris is sitting by the corpse of his mother Lisa in a catatonic state. Trend turns on Abigail's power and sees boats with refugees leaving the coast, and Los Angeles bursts into flames, and flashes of light illuminate the sky. He sends Nick after the rest of the group before the refugees overtake Abigail. Madison, Travis and Chris are fighting the infected on the beach. Nick is on the Zodiac, and they all flee from the shore along with Lisa's body. By taking everyone on board, Trend sets Abigail in motion as well. The group watches as the military blows up Los Angeles, and a raging inferno engulfs the earth. The next day, Trend informs the group that there is enough fuel on the yacht for 3,000 miles, if the engines are not overloaded. Travis checks Chris in his cabin, but he still does not react to what is happening. On the deck, the group notices a small boat crowded with at least 20 passengers. The passengers beg for help, and Madison asks Trend to save the passengers of the boat, but he refuses. Travis asks Alicia to scan the radio channels to find out a safe destination. Trend informs Travis and Madison that he's headed for San Diego in hopes of getting help from the Border Patrol. Madison urges Travis to convince Trend to save the boat, but Travis agrees that they cannot take additional passengers on board. Alicia listens to distress calls from survivors on the radio. The Coast Guard announces that they cannot rescue anyone by sea, land, or air. In hand with Trend admits to Nick that he doesn't have a backup plan in case San Diego fails. Madison urges Alicia to stop listening to the radio and get some rest, but Alicia refuses. A worried Travis informs Madison that Chris has been sitting next to Lisa's body all day. Feeling Madison's anger about the boat, he argues that before helping other people, they need to take care of themselves. Alicia hears music on one of the radio channels and lingers. The man urges listeners to respond. "I'm here," she says. Chris kisses Lisa on the head. He joins Daniel, who is fishing from the deck. Daniel, still going through the loss of his wife, sympathizes with Chris about Lisa. Travis watches their conversation. Nick confronts Ophelia and suggests that she apply ice to the gunshot wound, as well as drink a lot of vodka. Alicia is talking to a man on the radio. He tells her that his name is Jack and that he is on a small boat, but does not dare to tell her his location. Travis approaches Daniel to ask him how Chris is doing. "Someday Chris will understand that what you did for his mother was an act of mercy," Daniel assures Travis. Madison hears a conversation with Trend in the control room and is surprised that he is alone. He explains that he talks to himself to stay awake. Alicia tells Jack that they have a desalination system. Jack jokes that she must be rich, but she says that the yacht is not hers. She hesitates to reveal more specific information. Madison joins Daniel on deck. Daniel asks about C-Trend's motives, pointing out that C-Trend was already packing his bags before the bombs started falling. Jack tells Alicia that he is with his brother and his brother's wife. Alicia listens sympathetically as Jack talks about how his girlfriend turned. On deck, the group gathers around Lisa's body while Travis delivers a eulogy. Chris forcefully pushes Lisa's body into the sea and leaves. Below deck, Chris explodes at Travis. "You shot her," he shouts, punching Travis in the face. Travis returns to the group in the dining room, clutching his bloody lip. Alicia tries to contact Jack by radio and finds out that his boat is sinking. She offers to rescue him and gives her location so they can determine how far away he is. Alicia tells Travis and Madison that a man named Jack needs their help. Strad angrily asks what she told Jack about their situation. She insists she didn't tell him anything important. Nick tells Trend that Alicia was just trying to help people, but Trend says that everyone who sails on his ship should make some contribution or at least not be a hindrance. When Nick asks what his own contribution is, Trend replies that Nick's contribution lies in his fearlessness. Madison comforts Chris and defends Travis, saying she would have killed Lisa if Travis hadn't. When the group sits down to dinner, Chris goes on deck and sees that the fog is coming. He jumps into the water, throwing everyone into a panic. Nick dives in after him, but Chris explains that he's just going for a swim. Alicia tells Jack that they can't save him. "It's okay, Alicia, I've got you. See you soon," he says ominously. Meanwhile, C-Trend sees an approaching boat on the radar. In the water, Nick is attacked by an infected person, but he manages to escape. When the fog clears, the group sees dead bodies floating around, the bodies of refugees from the boat. A boat riddled with bullets floats nearby. Travis picks up Chris in Zodiac. Nick swims up to the overturned boat and finds the ship's log. C-Trend hears another radar warning. "It could be the ones who did it," he tells Alice and Madison, pointing to the shot boat. Trend tells Madison that they need a head start if they want to outrun an approaching vessel, as it is moving at 25 knots, faster than Abigail. Travis, Chris and Nick return to Abigail. While C-Trend turns on the boat, Madison tells Travis that whoever shot the boat will come back for them. A walker crawls out of the ocean and crawls to a boy and a girl playing on the shore. A protective chain link fence prevents the infected from reaching them. C-Trend is tracking an unknown ship on Abigail's radar. Madison yells at Nick for putting himself in danger by jumping into the water behind the wreckage of a sailboat. Travis appears with the magazine that Nika retrieved from the sailboat and says they have a problem. Travis tells Trend that, according to the magazine, the military has already burned San Diego to the ground. C-Trend suggests hiding from a rapidly approaching ship by retreating to the coast. Travis suggests Katrina Island, where there is a ranger station that can offer supplies and a shortwave radio. Travis assures Chris that they are going to a safe place. Chris asks how Travis knows this is a safe place, but Travis doesn't have an answer. As Abigail approaches Katrina Island, Madison sees a flash of light in the house. Madison, Travis, Nick, Alicia and Chris leave the boat. C-Trend stays on board with Ophelia and Daniel, who wants to follow the trend. Madison's group approaches the house she saw from the boat. A boy runs out to meet them, the one from the beach. Travis introduces himself to the boy's father, George Geary, and asks permission to dock for the night. At the house, George tells Travis that, judging by his messages with other ranger stations, he believes that the entire country west of the Continental Divide has collapsed, and the border with Mexico is completely blocked. In the kitchen, George's wife, Melissa, asks Madison about her work as a consultant and asks if she has ever worked with young children. Melissa introduces Madison to her teenage son Seth. Back at Abigail, Daniel checks on Ophelia. She says she is beginning to understand the world better, which helps her understand it. He's cruel, she says. In the house, Nick and Alice are playing with the children Harry and Willa. Harry takes Nick to his room and shows him figures with red dots on their foreheads depicting gunshot wounds. Harry says Nick won't get sick because his family has power pills. It's like a vitamin, he explains, if I take it, my family stays together. In the control room, Daniel accuses Trent of wanting to get rid of the group members in order to save his resources. Trent rejects Daniel's accusation. George tells Travis that the apocalypse is part of nature's plan. The world can't support itself, so he stepped back and said enough is enough. This is his course correction, he explains. He says he raised his family on the island and intends for them to stay here. When they return to the boat, Madison tells Travis that Melissa may have turned on the lights on purpose. She assumes that Melissa wants to leave the island, but is too afraid of George to say so. On Abigail's yacht, Nick looks at the stars. He reflects with Alicia that being able to see the stars without light pollution or smog blocking them is a dish of the apocalypse. Changing the subject, Nick tells her that he is worried about the future of Harry and Willa or his absence. The next day, Chris sees Seth walking to the beach with a pickaxe. Seth takes Chris to the beach, where the infected are hitting the chain-link fence. Seth hits the infected man on the head with a pickaxe and offers Chris a try. Travis is looking for Chris. Chris kills the infected with a pickaxe. Seth praises his technique and explains that George taught him how to kill and survive. Travis finds them and tells Chris to get back on the boat. He looks away when Chris kills another infected. Travis finds George in the house and remembers the times when Chris mowed the lawns and took out the garbage, and did not kill the infected. That's how we're coping now, says George. George asks Travis to help him fix the fence. He tells Travis about the large number of infected at the nearby marina and predicts that it's only a matter of time before the herd finds them. Travis asks why George doesn't run away. We're all going to die. It's a matter of surrender or survival, acceptance or denial, says George. Alicia visits the ranger station and draws a tattoo of her ex-boyfriend Matt on the bulletin board. Nika searches for drugs in the house and finds a bag of pills hidden in George's office. On the Bigil ship, an unknown ship finally disappears from the radar. Trent announces that it's time to sail. Madison informs Melissa that they are leaving and asks if she turned on the lights on purpose to signal them. Melissa admits that she gave the signal in the hope that they would take Harry and Willa, since George and Seth plan that the whole family will die together on the island. Madison passes Melissa's request to Travis and insists that they save Harry and Willa. You're not taking them, Travis, you're saving them, she says. Travis reluctantly agrees to talk to George. While there is no trend, Daniel searches the tube. He discovers a map of California, Mexico, as well as a loaded MP5 submachine gun in a locked compartment. Trend, left alone, talks to someone on a satellite phone. It's all clear now, he says. Sunset. I'll be there. On the boat, Nick tells Madison and Travis that he found poison in George's office, and predicts that George plans to destroy his family. Travis, Madison and Nick return to Geary's house to pick up Harry and Willa. Melissa is hurriedly explaining some of her children's quirks when George walks in. He angrily demands to explain what happens when the argument is interrupted by Harry. He reports that something is wrong with Willa. Upstairs, Willa is found dead after she swallowed energy pills from George's stash. Melissa hugs Willa, who opens her eyes, turns around and bites her. George agrees to let Travis take Harry, but refuses to join them. Travis' group runs to the boat with Harry. Seth chases them with a rifle and forces them to give Harry. Melissa, who is now infected, walks towards them along the dock. Seth shoots Melissa while Harry's back is turned. In the middle of the ocean, Alex swims to his wounded comrade Jake, who survived the crash of Flight 462. She delivers Jake to the fetus with the other survivors. Tom, one of the survivors, hits the infected passenger with an oar and pushes him overboard. A few days pass, and Tom tells Alex that Jake is dying and urges her to kill him before he turns. That night, he stabs Tom when he tries to kill Jake in his sleep. Michael, the survivor, urges Alex to put Jake out of his misery. On the ship, Abigail with Trend is trying to reach her interlocutor by satellite phone to confirm his arrival. The phone is disconnected. Madison and Travis start making love in the room. The boat creaks to a stop. Travis determines that the engine has failed due to a clogged water intake. He says that to solve the problem he will have to look into the submarine. Madison persuades him to wait until dawn, but Trend and Travis agree that there is no time to waste. Travis scuba dives into the water and swims to the water intake. He sees the infected Michael floundering next to the hull, his hand stuck in the intake valve. Michael attacks Travis, who is panicking and trying to escape. Later in the engine room, Travis starts removing the accumulated sludge from the filtration system and informs Trend that repairs may take all day, with Trend responding that they can't wait that long. Daniel notices that Ophelia's wound is infected. She informs him that she has run out of antibiotics. He forbids her to ask Madison for antibiotics, insisting that families should take care of themselves. Blood is blood. Alicia shows Madison a place on the shore, littered with luggage from the crashed plane. Alicia, Nick and Chris insist on going ashore to get supplies. Madison and Travis refuse to let them go, but Daniel offers them to go with him. Alicia, Nick and Chris board the Zodiac. Daniel informs Madison that Trend is planning to sail to Baja, California, and asks her to ask Trend about his intentions. On shore, Daniel tells everyone to stay in sight while they gather supplies. Travis goes scuba diving to work on the water intake. Chris separates from the group and goes deep into the island. Madison hears a noise and sees blood coming out of the place in the water where Travis was swimming. Michael's body floats to the surface after Travis stabs him in the eye socket. Nick finds a knife in his suitcase and puts it in his pocket. Elsewhere, Chris discovers part of the wrecked plane's hull and enters the cockpit. He teases the infected and hits him with a metal crowbar. A man, still alive, wakes up in the next row and weakly begs for help. Madison tells Trend about his secret plans and demands to tell him what is in Bach. Trend says he has a shelter with food, water and concrete walls in Rosarito, Baja California, but explains that he has very little time to get there. She demands that he take the whole group with him. They carefully conclude a contract of trust in each other. Daniel rummages through the luggage in search of antibiotics for Ophelia. Nick informs Daniel that Ophelia needs amoxicillin, oxycodone or something similar. Daniel realizes that Chris is missing and goes in search of him. Chris helps the surviving passenger of the plane to get up from his seat. When a man can't move, Chris notices that part of his spine is exposed. The critically injured passenger continues to beg for help, but refuses water. Chris understands that the man wants to die, and knowing that the wound fatally hits the infected person on the head, Daniel looks for Chris on the beach, and then goes deep into the island. Alicia leaves Nick to find Daniel and Chris. Nick finds a large cache of amoxicillin. Madison informs Travis about the plans from the Trend in Bach and says that the house is their best chance of survival. Travis refuses to trust the Trend, but Madison claims they have no choice. Daniel runs into Alex on the beach, who is fleeing from behind a sand dune. "They're coming," she says. A large herd of infected people appears in the distance. Nick notices an infected person trapped in a nearby pit. He watches curiously as crabs crawl over him. He manages to catch and eat one of them. Getting too close to the edge, Nick accidentally slips into the pit and is attacked. He stabs the infected using a knife found earlier. Another infected person falls into the pit. Alicia finds Chris at the body of the plane. He is visibly shaken by what he has experienced and does not dare to tell the details. They hear a shot in the distance. Madison sees the herd through binoculars and tells Trend they need to leave. Daniel shoots the herd, and Alex, Alicia and Chris join him. Back on Abigail, Travis removes the last sediment and severed arm from the filtration system and repairs the engine. Trend launches the boat. The herd is approaching Daniel, Alex, Alicia and Chris. They fight back, but there are significantly more of them. When they are almost defeated, Nick appears, covered in blood and helps fight off the infected, giving the group enough time to escape. As they run, Nick realizes that the infected are not attacking him. He goes to the herd and comes face to face with one of them. The infected person can smell him, but does not react, as Nick growls at him in response. Nick is brought out of his trance by Alicia's voice, and he retreats. The group gets to the Zodiac and descends into the water. Alex tells Daniel that they need to make one stop. Trend looks through binoculars and sees the approaching Zodiac with a yellow board in tow. Back on Abigail, Madison informs the group that Trend has invited them to join him at a complex in Bach where there is food, electricity and water. Trend refuses to let Alex and Jake board the ship. Travis insists that they at least tow Alex's fetus to San Diego. Alicia and Madison bring Alex and Jake water and a blanket. Nick gives Ophelia a rosary he found on the beach. Inside the boat, the Trend goes back and forth. On the raft, Alex hugs Jake and assures him that now everything is as bad as it will never be, and that every day he will get better and better. The Trend rushes out and cuts off the fruit. Madison objects, but it's too late. The fetus drifts behind, and Abigail sails south. Trend silently returns to the wheelhouse. Nick swims ashore in the middle of the night, avoiding detection by a helicopter and a patrol boat. He gets to a recently abandoned refugee camp on the shore. Attracting the attention of the infected, he lures him into one of the tents and kills him, smeared in blood from the infected stomach. Back on Abigail, Travis condemns Trend for cutting off Alex's fetus while Chris and Ophelia are standing on the deck. A fetus with 2 men and a bleeding pregnant woman approaches Abigail. Chris wonders if he should kill them, but hesitates. The passengers of the raft come on board without an invitation, claiming that the woman has complications with pregnancy. Travis, Daniel and Madison rush upstairs and interrogate strangers. Trend tries to get his MP5, but discovers that the store has been cleaned by Daniel. Madison helps pregnant Vida to go to the bathroom. Alicia goes upstairs and recognizes the voice of one of the men, Jack, on a walkie-talkie. Another man, Reed, hits Travis. Meanwhile, Vida smashes Madison's head in a mirror and then ties her hands. Jack and Reed tie everyone up and hold them at gunpoint. Trend escapes on a raft, and Reed shoots him. In a flashback, Trend meets Thomas Abigail at a bar in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, shortly after Hurricane Katrina. Thomas tells Trend that he came to town to buy real estate. Trend explains that everything he owns is underwater. He helps Thomas get to his hotel room, where Thomas passes out. Trend takes Thomas's credit cards. Back in the present, Trend is floating on his raft and trying to dry his satellite phone by blowing on it. Back on Abigail, Reed threatens to shoot Chris if the group doesn't provide the key to the boat. Travis and Ophelia explain that Trend had the key, but Travis suggests starting the boat by connecting it to the power grid. Vida returns to the group with Madison. Alicia tells Madison that Nick wasn't in his bed. Reed tells Jack to find a walkie-talkie with Alicia so they can contact their leader, Connor. Alicia assures Madison that she will fix the situation, and accuses Jack of luring her. He insists he had no choice, but says Connor is listening to him and will assess the situation when he arrives. And then I'll be safe? She asks. I promise, he says. Nick arrives in a closed village. Disguised by blood, he passes by the infected without attracting attention. In another flashback, Thomas and his companion Luis Flores talk to a Trend about credit card theft. Instead of calling the police, Thomas tells Trend to meet him at a bar to discuss how Trend can fix the situation. Trend says that he always intended to return the money to him with interest. In the present, the sea Trend clings to the deflated fruit and accidentally drops the phone. In the control room, Travis connects Abigail. He tells Reed that he has to go to the engine room to turn off the computers. Daniel asks Madison to distract Vida while he loosens his bonds. Madison asks Vida about her pregnancy. In the engine room, Reed advises Travis to start the ship by Connor's arrival, so that he does not get hurt himself. "Prove your worth," he says. Jack communicates by radio with Connor, who informs him that he is on his way. Jack tells Alicia that he owes Connor for saving his life, but insists that he doesn't like what he's doing. He invites Alicia to join their group. Alicia refuses to leave her family. Jack promises to ensure the safety of her family, even if Connor cannot accept them all into his camp. She hugs him. Nick knocks on the front door of the house. Lewis sneaks up on him with a gun. Nick says he was sent by Trend. Lewis loads the luggage into his car and explains to Nick that the apartment complex. This is Abigail's house experience. Nick asks if Luis is the one who will transport them all across the border. "What do you mean by all of us?" Lewis asks. While Daniel is working on his bonds, Madison asks Vida if the baby is moving. She beckons to Vida, asking if the dead baby will turn over in her stomach. Vida threatens to shoot Madison. Reed and Travis return from the engine room. Travis hides the crowbar behind the seat cushion before heading to the control room. Nick and Lewis are going to the beach. Lewis tells Nick that he has secured passage for only 2 people, but Nick thinks that Trend has probably included them in his plans. Lewis explains that he got to know the Trend many years ago through Thomas Abigail. He says his mother, who works for the Abigail family and raised him and Thomas together, lives in a house in Bach. He leads Nick to the Zodiac. In a flashback with Trend and Tom sunbathing in the house of Bach, Tom persuades Trend to postpone a work trip to Los Angeles, but Trend says it's too important for their business. They hold hands. Travis starts the engine just as Connor arrives. Connor climbs aboard Abigail along with 2 other armed pirates and admires the ship. He invites Travis and Alicia to join his company, but says he doesn't need the others. He grants Alicia's request to transfer her family safely to shore. Alicia and Travis are being taken away. Reed and the bodyguards remain to guard the remaining prisoners. Nick and Lewis are sailing to Abigail on the Zodiac. Nick looks through binoculars and notices 2 armed pirates. Lewis shoots the pirates Ben and Brianna with a rifle. Madison hits Reed with a crowbar. On board, Madison tells a certain Lewis what happened to the Trend. Lewis refuses to cross the border without him. In a flashback, Thomas tries to dissuade Trend from going to Los Angeles, given reports of an outbreak. The Trend promises to return in 2 days. They kiss. Madison drives up to the sea Trend on the Zodiac and picks it up on board. On board Connor's ship, he cooks steak for Alicia. After he leaves, Vida steals a steak and locks Alicia up. Alicia sneaks through an unlocked door and finds herself on the bow of the ship with no way to escape. Jack warns her that she cannot roam the ship freely and returns her. Alicia demands to know if her family managed to escape. Jack agrees to find out. On board Abigail, a captive Reed informs Daniel that Connor, his brother, has 12 men in 5 boats, and he will be looking for him. Daniel lets Chris stand guard at Reed's door. Daniel suggests Madison use Reed's connection to Connor as leverage. They discover Connor's base by scanning the radar for the presence of the fleet. Meanwhile, the Trend is coming to life in the wheelhouse. Madison directs Abigail north, but Luis reminds her that they have a short time to cross the border with Mexico. Madison refuses to leave her family. Trend agrees to give her half a day to rescue Travis and Alicia. In Spanish, Luis tells Trend that someone is waiting for them and they need to leave, but Trend replies that he will understand. Lewis objects that he only has enough money for two to cross the border, and Daniel overhears this. Daniel advises Madison to let Nick and Chris help fight Connor's group and urges her to stop treating them like children. Madison ignores his advice. Meanwhile, Jack instructs Alice to scan their radar for new ships that his people can capture. Travis wakes up in his cell and confronts Alex, who tells him how desperate they were after they were abandoned. That she had to euthanize Jake on a raft, and also that she was the one who informed Connor about Baby Gale and offered to capture her. Back on Abigail, Madison forbids the Trend to send Nick on new errands. C-Trend claims that Nick knows how to survive, but Madison replies that C-Trend has never seen Nick in the throes of addiction and is worried that he is using drugs again. When Jack spots Abigail's approaching airliner on the radar, Alicia realizes that Reed would not have been able to get her family to safety in such a short period of time. Jack admits that Reed sometimes kills passengers after hijacking the plane, and offers to help Alicia find her family. Alicia tells Jack to radio Connor and warn him about a potential vessel. They plan to escape together while Connor conducts reconnaissance on the ship. In his cell, Travis tells Alex that he kept her on the raft because he was afraid Jake might be infected. "You knew how to do the right thing, but you chose something else," she tells him. Travis apologizes to Alex and reveals that he was forced to kill his son's mother, telling her that it cost part of him. Trend notices Connor's fleet moored to the shore and informs Daniel that they have arrived at his base. Reed talks to Chris and pisses him off, but Nick closes the door to shut Reed out. Chris blames himself for letting Reed's group on the ship, but Nick assures him that it's not his fault. Meanwhile, Alicia and Nick find Travis and tell him that they are plotting an escape that night. When Connor radios Abigail, Madison informs him that they are holding Reed and are ready to trade him for Travis and Alicia. Connor agrees. However, after Madison passes out, Chris shoots Reed and declares that he was going to turn. The group finds Reed dead in a cabin with a bloodied face. Madison comforts Chris, who realizes that he has just destroyed all hopes for Travis' safe return. While Travis and Alice are preparing for a prisoner exchange, Reed turns when Nick and Ophelia clean up the blood in his room. Daniel backs Reed up against the wall and throws a hood over his head. Daniel hears a disembodied voice telling him to take his gun. Alicia runs away from Jack while Madison is preparing the Zodiac. Nick wants to deliver Reed, but Madison refuses to let him go. She's leaving with Reed on Zodiac. Nick and Trend watch Pierce through binoculars and notice that Connor has only Travis. Meanwhile, Alicia stumbles upon Travis' empty cell and is attacked by Vida. Alicia knocks her to the ground and locks her in a cell. At the pier, Madison hands Reed over to Connor. Connor's men are freeing Travis. Connor removes Reed's hood and is immediately bitten by an infected Reed. Alicia runs to the bow of the ship and sees Madison and Travis on the pier, but she is cornered by Jack. Jack begs Alicia to stay with him and asks if she really wants to live with people who abandon survivors like Alex. "I'm sorry," she says and jumps into the water. Madison and Travis rescue her on Zodiac and return to Abigail. In a church in Vail de Guadalupe, Baja California, a priest exhorts his parishioners to fight with the dead. Parishioners take the communion wafers one by one. Parishioners are arming themselves in the town square. Thomas arrives in his truck and calls the priest to stop. Without defending her, the priest says. Suddenly, the parishioners begin to fall to their knees in the carriage, blood pouring from their eyes. Abigail's ship is approaching the Mexican flotilla guarding the border. Travis checks on Chris, who asks why everyone is mad at him. Travis says Madison doesn't believe Reed was infected when Chris shot him. Chris is shocked, he thought Madison was on his side. In the control room, Lewis is preparing to meet with his military on the flotilla and pay for their passage. C-Trend notices the military approaching by boat. Concerned that a second officer is traveling with Lewis's contact, he orders Madison to hide everyone below deck. From the engine room, Madison's group overhears a conversation between Trend, Lewis, and two officers. After the officers insist on searching the boat to make sure there are no infected people on board, the shooting begins. Madison's group goes upstairs and discovers a mortally wounded Lewis lying next to two dead officers. Daniel stabs the officers to prevent them from turning. Lewis begs Daniel not to stab him and hands Ophelia a locket with the face of an owl, asking her to give it to her mother. Daniel throws the locket into the ocean. Luis whispers to Nick while Trend directs Abigail to the Mexican coast. On land with the Trend leads the group to the city of Vail de Guadalupe. In front of the church they find a pile of dead parishioners. Trend notices Thomas's truck and calls his name. The group fights off a herd of infected parishioners. Daniel grabs the infected boy and is paralyzed by the memory of someone holding his neck as a child. Ophelia kills the infected boy for Daniel's sake. Nick sits stunned after killing a young infected girl. Madison is stricken with an infected and is fighting for her life. Chris watches her struggle from a distance of a few steps and does nothing to help. Alicia screams at him and saves Madison herself. The group gets into Thomas's truck and drives off. Trend drove the group to Thomas's gated estate, where they are met by Celia, Lewis's mother. Trend informs her that Lewis is dead. Now he's one of them, talking to Trend. Then he'll find his way back, she says. The maid asks the group to hand over their weapons, to which Daniel responds reluctantly. Trend helps Thomas and finds out that he was bitten. Meanwhile, Alicia accuses Chris of standing on the sidelines when Madison was attacked. He insists that he just froze, but when Alicia pressed him, Chris threatens to hurt her if she tells anyone about what she saw. In the kitchen, Nick tells Celia that Lewis remembered her when he was dying. Celia calmly explains that the dead have always walked among them. The only difference is that now we can see them, she says. Madison overhears their conversation and later warns Celia that Nick is impressionable. Daniel looks at the photograph of the dead posted outside the open-air sanctuary. He notices an owl carved into the trunk of a tree, similar to Lewis's medallion. Celia posts a photo of Luis and explains that his death doesn't bother her because he wasn't shot in the head. When Madison brings food to Thomas and Trend, Thomas asks her to look after Trend when he dies. Later, Ophelia calls Daniel to dinner and finds him sitting on the bed in a daze. When Lissy tells May Madison about Chris' threat, Madison talks to Travis and worries that Chris is sick. Travis defends Chris and angrily asks why Madison isn't giving Chris the same support he always gave Nick. Madison decides to sleep in Alicia's room for protection while Travis sleeps with Chris. Trend urges Thomas to stop suffering and let go of life, offering to commit suicide so that they can stay together after death. Nick accompanies Ophelia to the sanctuary, where she prays to her mother. Nick sees a carving in the shape of an owl, and he has a memory of a drug den in a Los Angeles church. In this flashback, he sees his friend feasting on a corpse. Meanwhile, Daniel goes for a night walk and sees the boy Juan lowering the dog down the chute leading to the wine cellar. Juan explains to Daniel that he is talking to his mother. Daniel enters the cellar and sees a cell full of infected. Daniel turns to Celia, who explains that they are all family members of people working on the estate. When she prepares 2 wafers for communion, Daniel realizes that she has killed the parishioners with poisoned wafers. She urges him to come to terms with his dead. Celia brings the wafers to Trend and Thomas and praises Trend for choosing to die with Thomas. She leaves the room and locks it with a key. Nick finds Celia drinking wine in the courtyard. They're not really dead, are they? He asks. She shakes her head and says that the infected are just something that will come later. Thomas finally dies, but instead of fulfilling his death pact, Trend searches the drawers in Thomas's bedroom. Meanwhile, Chris wakes up and sneaks into the room where Madison and Alicia are sleeping and notices a knife on the nightstand. As he picks up the knife and stands over Madison and Alicia, a shot rings out, waking them both up. Alicia sees the knife and screams at Chris, who runs away. Strand sits down next to Thomas with a gun. Thomas gets shot in the head. In one flashback, a young Daniel Salazar stands by a pond full of dead bodies in the jungles of El Salvador. "Take the gun, Daniel," the man tells him. Daniel and Ophelia wake up to the sound of a gunshot. When they run out into the street, Ophelia begins to peel the skin off her face. Daniel wakes up. It was a nightmare. He hears people running in the corridor. Everyone runs to Thomas's room, where C. Trend shot Thomas in the head. Celia yells at C. Trend for killing Thomas instead of letting him turn. Travis asks Alicia to help him find Chris. She refuses, explaining that Chris kept a knife next to her bed. Celia forbids Steve to keep Thomas and attacks him when he declares that Thomas was not her son. Celia orders Steve and his group to leave before the next day. Travis sees Chris in the vineyard, but Chris runs away. The next day, Daniel secretly sharpens the razor blade and hides it in his pocket. Travis, after spending the whole night searching for Chris, finds an infected person to whom he has pierced his head. Chris watches Travis from afar. Travis follows the trail of the fallen infected, which leads him to the Mexican in the hut. The man tries to send Travis away, but Travis falls from wounds on his bare feet. Madison tells Nick and Alicia to pack up quietly so they can run to Abigail and escape from Celia's clutches. Alicia refuses to return to the boat, and Nick defends Celia. Nick brings the converted Louis to Celia after he left the estate under the mask of infected blood. Celia invites Nick to stay at the estate. He convinces her to let his family stay with him too, but he is told that Trend has to leave. While C. Trend is digging a grave for Thomas, Daniel persuades him not to keep him in such an unholy place. Trend notices Daniel's unusual behavior and asks what's wrong with him. Meanwhile, Madison asks Nick about his fascination with the dead and asks if Celia told him to find Louis. Nick claims that Celia just wanted her son back and offers to bring Travis back as well. He tells Madison that the infected won't touch him. "I'm not going to die," he declares. Daniel says about Ophelia that Griselda, his deceased wife, is waiting for them in the afterlife. He grabs her and cuts the man who is trying to restrain him. A group of men are holding Daniel. Madison talks to Anika's Trend. Trend is not surprised that Celia was able to inspire a young and vulnerable drug addict. He invites Madison to join him on Abigail, but she refuses to leave without Travis. The man in the cabin gives Travis shoes and tries to get him out of the house. Travis notices movement under the bedroom door. The man whispers to Travis that Chris threatened to harm his son if he didn't make Travis leave. Travis bursts into the room and finds Chris holding the man's son at gunpoint. Travis and Chris fight, resulting in Travis snatching the knife from him. "I'm no good," Chris says. After Celia delivers a eulogy at Thomas's grave, she asks Trend to leave. Ophelia demands to see Daniel, but Celia says he is too dangerous. Celia brings food to Daniel, who is tied up in the pantry, and urges him to ask forgiveness from his dead. Daniel hears Griselda's voice. After Celia leaves, Griselda's ghost appears in front of him. Nick finds Travis, who says that Chris needs him and that Madison needs to be told that he couldn't find him. Nick leaves Travis a knife for protection. Madison begs Celia to let Trend stay, but Celia tells her that she has to learn to accept the infected the same way Nick does. Madison asks Celia to help her understand. Daniel talks to Griselda and reflects on all the people he has killed. "What about the one that's stalking you now?" Griselda asks. In the flashback, young Daniel looks at the pool of corpses and notices that one of the men is still alive. The man hands him a gun and tells him to shoot. Daniel obeys. "The first victim was you," Griselda tells Daniel. Sat down, takes Madison to the basement and enters the cell to show Madison all his infected. Madison closes the gate, locking Celia inside. Jorge unties Daniel to give him some food. Daniel attacks Jorge and runs away. "I'm waiting for you," Griselda says to Daniel. Sophia and the staff are escorted from the Trend to the gate. Alicia and Trend wave goodbye to each other while Sophia closes the gate. Inside an infection-filled wine cellar, Daniel douses it with gasoline and sets it on fire. Instead of seeing the infected, he hallucinates all the people he has killed when Griselda appears from the crowd and smiles. Flames lick Daniel's feet. After the fire suddenly engulfs the estate, Trend sneaks back and steals a pickup truck. Nick sees that the estate is on fire. Madison runs into the pantry, sees Jorge unconscious on the floor and leaves him in search of Daniel. Outside, Alicia restrains Ophelia, who is crying for Daniel. "He's gone," says Alicia. Trend drives up in a truck and encourages them to get inside. Nick approaches Madison and says he couldn't find Travis. He asks suspiciously where Celia is. "She was right about us," he says. "We're destroying everything." Trend pushes Madison into the truck when Nick turns his back on her. They watch as Nick, splattered with blood, leaves untouched among the infected. When Trend and the women flee the camp, Nick goes along with the zombies, ignoring his mother in the truck. Nick wakes up in an emergency house in Bach. He finds Sophia. She goes south to find Juan's father, but advises Nick to go north if he wants to join the same as her. She warns him to beware of strangers on the road, Manus, who take advantage of the new lawlessness. Sophia then gives him a backpack with food and a jug of water and directs him to the highway. Nick makes his way through the Baji Hills and gets to the highway. The pointer shows that Tijuana is 100 kilometers away. He searches the abandoned car for supplies, but finds nothing. In flashbacks, he plays with his girlfriend Gloria in the War of the Fingers in a rehabilitation center. She convinces him to rehearse the upcoming meeting with his parents in order to avoid a long stay in a rehabilitation center. She plays the role of his father and asks him to share his feelings after a 3-week stay in a rehabilitation center. Nick blames his father for not being in his life. Returning to the present, Nick finds an abandoned empty house and sets up camp for the night. While he is sleeping, a woman sneaks up to him and attacks him knocked down, shouting in Spanish. A frightened little girl is standing behind her. Nick tries to get his backpack and water, but she chases him away. He wanders along the road without food and water. He notices a water bottle in the car. He dodges the infected in the driver's seat and snatches the water. It also picks up the radio from the dashboard. When he sees a jeep approaching, he hides behind the car. 3 criminals get out of the jeep and kill an elderly man asking for water. They hear the crackle of Nick's walkie-talkie and chase him through a field and dense thickets. He manages to escape. He walks through the desert under the scorching sun. Desperate for water and food, he tears a cactus leaf and eats the pulp, but he vomits and pushes it out. Having no other way out, he urinates on his hand and drinks it. That night, Nick snuggles up to the van as the temperature plummets. In the flashback, he and Gloria are waiting in the hallway of the rehabilitation center. They see Gloria's well-to-do parents check in at the front desk. Madison appears and waves to him. They are taken to a separate room, where Madison tells Nick why his father doesn't visit him. He died in a head-on collision. Nick breaks down and screams in grief. Gloria looks into the room and sees Madison hugging Nick. In the present, Nick wakes up to 2 hungry dogs barking in his face. He tries to escape, but one of them viciously bites his leg. He grabs a rock, fights off the animal and climbs onto the roof of the van. The barking of dogs attracts a herd of infected people to the van, which are attacked by dogs. Unable to deal with one of them quickly enough, the dogs are overwhelmed and eaten. Nick lies down on the roof of the van and examines the deep wound on his leg. The herd hears his movement and pounces on the van. He closes his eyes and prays. In the distance, a car's signal is heard from 100 to flock to him. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Nick slides off the van and eats meat from one of the dog carcasses. He removes the belt from the crippled infected person and bandages his wounded leg with it. Smeared in infected blood, he goes with the herd. Over time, due to lack of food and water, he loses orientation, his vision becomes blurred. He imagines that the infected are talking to him, and they are walking along a long road. The herd finds the previous robbers and starts shooting at the infected. One of them recognizes Nick among the crowd. Frightened by Nick's look, he freezes and tries to reload the rifle. The herd devours the robber and one of his accomplices, and the lone survivor escapes. Luciano and two men are watching through binoculars for Nick, who is walking along the road with the herd, barely able to stand on his feet. Eventually Nick falls to the ground, dehydrated and exhausted. Francis insists on saving him, but Luciano refuses. He tells her that Nick is dying and she changes her mind. Nick is lying on the asphalt, barely regaining consciousness. In a flashback, he shoots heroin with Gloria at a Los Angeles church shooting range the day before he encountered her inanimate body. After telling about his father's death, Nick prepares for himself to overdose on heroin in a suicide attempt, but does not tell Gloria about it before they shoot each other. In the present, it starts raining, reviving Nick, who is doing his best to drink the rain. The next day, he hobbles into town and finds a pharmacy. He searches for medicines to treat a festering wound, but finds nothing. At the barbershop, Nick wraps the wound with duct tape. Luciana and Francisca approach him and ask if he is infected. Nick assures them it's just a dog bite. They give him a drink of water, and Luciana invites him to go with them. A pharmacist named Alejandro treats Nick's wound in the infirmary and notices that Nick acted stupidly by walking with the dead, despite his reasoning that it is safe. He invites Nick outside, and he finds himself in a colony surrounded by a walled community of survivors. The streets are busy with noisy shops, people are going about their business, children are laughing. Nick wakes up in the infirmary in the colony. He wanders around the city and sees a crying girl. In the next field, the girl's father is surrounded by neighbors from the colony. "Ready?" asks Alejandra, the leader of the community. The father gives up his knife and enters the bus. He passes through the bus to a closed field filled with infected people. He's sacrificing himself to the herd while people are watching. Madison, Alicia, with Trend and Ophelia are driving around Tijuana in search of Nick. Alicia calls the search futile and insists that they return to Abigail. In the colony, Nick sees Alejandra administering medications to an elderly man. Alejandro is talking to Luciana. They look at Nick. Madison's group arrives on shore and discovers that Abigail is missing, stolen by the Mexican military. Alicia offers him shelter in a nearby hotel. Using drifting wood, they write messages for Travis and Nick. They drive to the pier of the Racerita Beach Hotel and assess the situation from afar. In the colony, Nick cleans bloody bandages at the tap. Luciana asks Nick to help her with the task. Madison's group drives up to the hotel and enters the lobby through barricaded doors. Strand rings the bell at the front desk to expel all infected. Luciana brings Nick to the infected field and pushes the infected to the wall. She cuts his throat and smears herself in the blood of the infected. Nick follows her example. Madison's group is looking for supplies in the hotel ballroom. Nika Luciana walking down the street of Tijuana. Nick asks Luciana about the man who sacrificed himself to the infected. Luciana says that the dying person sacrifices himself to the dead and that when the dead are gone, the world will be renewed. Nick asks if Alejandro was really bitten, because he didn't convert. Luciana says she saw it happen. In the hotel bar, Alicia Ophelia leaves to look for supplies in the rooms. Trend offers Madison a drink. Nika Luciana arrives at a supermarket guarded by local bandits. Luciana gives the leader of Mark a package of medicines. In return, she gets a shopping cart. She says the deal was for 2 carts, but the brand says there's only one now. Nika Luciana goes to the supermarket to buy groceries. Madison and Trend are having a martini at the hotel bar. Alicia and Ophelia collect clothes and food from the hotel room. Alicia finds an infected person hanging on the shower head in the bathroom. When they leave, Alicia puts a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door to indicate that there is an infected person inside. At the supermarket, Nick puts a chocolate bar in the cart. Luciana puts him back and tells him to take only the essentials. Nick sees a large group of numb drug addicts camped out in a supermarket. Mark kneels down next to one of the drug addicts, his sister. Alicia and Ophelia are gathering supplies in a hotel room. Alicia wonders why the man hanged himself. Ophelia assumes that he is tired of surviving, and predicts that they will not survive. Alicia disagrees. Nika Luciana leaves the market with a shopping cart full. When they leave, one of the bandits attacks Nick and grabs him, discovering a cake hidden in his pants. Mark chases Nick with a machete and prepares to chop off Nick's hand. Through an interpreter, Luciana, Nick threatens to stop supplying oxycodone to drug addicts, including Mark's sister, if they don't let him go. In addition, he requires a second shopping cart. Mark reluctantly agrees. Nika and Luciano are taking 2 carts with supplies back to the colony. Luciana is worried that the gang will follow them back and yells at Nick for upsetting the bandits. Madison and Trent get drunk at a bar and open up to each other. Madison tells the Trent about the death of Nick and Alicia's father. He was driving home from work, and his car drove into the oncoming lane, with Trent suggesting that he fell asleep, but Madison explains that despite what she told her children and their father committed suicide. She worries that the same darkness lives in Nick. Madison smashes her glass against the wall, pours more booze, then breaks another glass. With Trent banging on the piano, on the other side of the street, a herd of infected people is banging on the door of a souvenir shop, provoked by the noise in the bar. Alicia takes a shower, then looks for Ophelia. She goes out on the balcony and sees how the infected come out on the balcony, fall to the ground and flock to the bar. She hears loud piano music and screams for Madison. Alicia runs out into the corridor and sees that the stairwell is filled with infected. Back in the colony, Nick and Luciana bring supplies to the pantry. Nick gives a chocolate bar to a girl whose father was sacrificed. Luciana takes him into the house to meet Alejandro. Alejandro chastises Nick for angering the bandits. He goes on to explain the importance of faith, saying that only believers will remain after the world is cleansed of death. We were chosen. We will survive death, he says. Nick notices the scar on Alejander's shoulder, the bite Luciana was talking about. Infected people begin to swarm in the hotel bar. Alejandra preaches to her people in the colony church. Nick is standing in the hall. Madison and Trent fight the infected and find themselves trapped behind the bar. Alicia is standing alone in the room. We came from death, and we give ourselves to death, the parishioners repeat, and Nick joins them. In the flashback, the bride and groom dance at the wedding reception in the banquet hall of the Rosarita Beach Hotel. The bride's mother informs the hotel manager Elena that she and her guests must leave urgently due to reports of a spreading disease. When Elena tries to assure her that they are safe, her mother tells her that the authorities are considering closing the border and that she wants to get her whole family and guests to the north as soon as possible. While Elena is trying to assure the guests that they have nothing to worry about, the bride's father is dancing with his daughter, but he has a heart attack and falls on the dance floor. Elena tries to call for help, but the phone lines are not working. When resuscitation attempts failed, the father quickly regains consciousness and bites his daughter's face. In a panic, Elena and her nephew run away and lock the party guests in the banquet hall. Travis, still suffering from a leg injury, limps along a Mexican road with Chris. They find a car in the nearest town. Chris insists on looking for supplies at the restaurant while Travis starts the car. At the restaurant, Chris hears voices in the back room and sees 2 dead and infected. He stuffs a can of beans and several bottles of water into his backpack, then kills the infected arriving, saving one of the armed men who come out of the kitchen. While the men are distracted by the fight against the infected, Chris runs to the car and asks Travis to get behind the wheel. The man from the restaurant sees them leaving. Travis drives all night. He lets Chris get behind the wheel for the first time when he is struggling to control due to an injury. Alicia is hiding from the infected, roaming the corridors of the Rosarita Beach Hotel. She prepares to leave the room, but stops when an infected person rushes at the door. During the trip, Travis assures Chris that someday the world will return to normal, but Chris is skeptical. When the car runs out of gas, they make a fire by the roadside. Travis suggests they find a house on a hill with a good view, but Chris wonders what their long-term goal is. A truck is parked on the road. These are people from the restaurant. They hide, and Chris tells Travis that he stole food from the men from the restaurant. The men find a campsite and shout, promising not to touch the one who is hiding in the bushes. Travis and Chris come out of hiding. Men Brandon, Derek and baby James invite Travis and Chris to eat with them. Alicia leaves the room and finds herself cornered by the infected. She manages to escape only by jumping into the elevator shaft and climbing the cable to the floor above, out of reach of the infected. Elena saves her, but threatens her with an axe. "Where is he?" Elena demands. Travis informs Brandon's group that San Diego, their hometown, has been destroyed by the military along with all major cities up to the Continental Divide. Brandon offers Travis and Chris a ride to the USA. Travis refuses, but agrees to drive to the next city. Alicia asks Elena to help lure the infected out of the stairwell so she can go downstairs and find Madison. Elena explains that the guests of the wedding party took her nephew Hector hostage because they need her keys, which open access to every lobby and building of the hotel. Alicia offers to help Elena find Hector in exchange for Elena's help to get down. Chris tells Travis that they should join Brandon's group, but Travis worries that these people are too dangerous to be trusted. "Maybe that's what it takes," Chris replies. At the hotel, Alicia lures the infected from the stairs to the room. Elena closes the door behind them. Trapped, Alicia runs to the balcony and closes the sliding door. Elena appears from the next balcony and helps Alicia to get over her to a safe place. Alicia and Elena reach the banquet hall. Elena admits that she locked all the party guests inside to contain the disease. "Now they hate me," she says. Alicia says her group has done worse, and vows to ensure Elena's safety. Travis and Chris are going with Brandon's band. Chris is sitting in a taxi with Derek and James, laughing at their cheeky farce and joining in their jokes. A farm can be seen in the distance. Brandon's group goes to the farm in search of food and supplies. Travis takes Chris aside and suggests they stay at the farm while Brandon's group drives on. Chris refuses, saying they need to stay with people. He follows Brandon to inspect the barn. Brandon's group finds chickens in the barn. Overjoyed, they start chasing chickens, hoping for an easy meal. Meanwhile, Travis notices several fresh graves near the house and rushes to the barn. Alicia and Elena discover that the doors to the hotel bar are barricaded. Inside the bar, a herd of infected people are banging on the doors. In the lobby, they are approached by a small group of wedding party guests who are holding Elena's nephew, Hector, hostage. Elena gives them the keys in exchange for Hector. Alicia opens the doors of the bar, allowing the herd to pounce on the party guests. Travis runs to the barn and warns the group that whoever buried the people in the graves is still at the farm. The owner of the farm enters with a rifle. Travis insists that they leave and let the man leave his farm. When Chris and Brandon's group refuses, the man starts yelling at them in Spanish. Alicia is looking for Madison at the bar. She sees an obviously infected woman in a flannel shirt and assumes the worst, but the infected only look like Madison, and Alicia can't find any other traces of her mother. She runs through an underground tunnel with Elena and Hector. They bang on the locked door, and the infected crowd around them. Madison opens the locked door and lets Alicia, Elena and Hector through. The owner of the farm shoots James in the leg after he wrung the neck of a chicken. Escalating the tension, Chris grabs a gun from James and shoots him in the chest, causing a serious wound. Travis kneels down next to the dying owner of the farm. He looks incredulously at Chris, who holds out his hand to Travis. Travis turns away. In the bar of the Rosarita Beach Hotel, Madison and Trend are fighting off an infected herd. Madison hears Alicia calling her. She kills the infected and opens his belly. She is from the trend of covering herself with the blood of an infected person. Madison and Trend pass unnoticed among the infected. They leave the bar and barricade the door behind them. Outside, they discover that the truck is missing. C. Trend suggests that Alicia and Ophelia ran away together. Madison and S. Trend are sheltering in a building from under the center of the hotel. Madison tells Trend that Alicia would never leave them. Madison and S. Trend hear a loud bang. They follow the sound of a locked door and hear Alicia screaming for help from the other side. Madison smashes the lock with a fire extinguisher. Alicia, Elena and Hector run outside. In the colony, Nick visits Alejandra in the infirmary and offers to crush OxyContin tablets with powdered milk to increase the supply of drugs. He shows Alejandra how to grind an OxyContin tablet, mix it with powdered milk and get a new tablet. Back at the hotel, Madison suggests looking for Ophelia. Alicia says Ophelia has run away. They are assessing their meager reserves. Elena says that there is enough food in the main hotel to last for several months, but now everything is controlled by the guests of the wedding party. Madison and Trend are standing in front of the hotel and calling Oscar the groom. Oscar appears on the balcony and lets them in after they drop their weapons. Nika and Alejandro are cutting a new batch of OxyContin tablets. Nick recalls the bite scar on Alejandro's neck and is skeptical of Alejandro's claim that he survived the bite infection. Madison and S. Trend are dating Oscar and Eileen, the mother of the bride. Madison suggests that they join forces to make the hotel their home and protect it from the infected and enemies. Oscar agrees to help if they kick Elena out. Madison is protecting Elena. She killed my daughter, Eileen says with tears in her eyes. Madison tells Oscar that her group will remove all infected from the hotel with or without him. He gives them the keys to the hotel. After the meeting, Madison and Trend predict that it will be difficult for them to convince Eileen. Nick packs several bottles of diluted OxyContin to take with him to the next drug trafficking. Alejandra tells Nick that he was bitten when he tried to save a drug addict boy, whom the mafia mistook for an infected one. His wound then healed without incident, earning him a reputation for invulnerability. In the courtyard of Nick and Alejandro sees Luciana playing football with the children. Nick joins the game. Francisca arrives and tells Alejandro that they have found someone torn to pieces. They found him, Pablo. Luciana understands. Nika, Luciana leaves the colony to engage in drug trafficking. Luciana explains that Pablo was her brother. Nick hugs her while she cries. Hector, Alicia with Trend starts checking the hotel. Hector opens the door to the room, releasing the infected. Alicia stabs him in the head with a knife. Alicia and Hector drag the infected bodies from the hotel to the beach. The party guests begin to help. Alicia tells Madison that if they keep cleaning up the dead one room at a time, it will take weeks, maybe even several months, to clean up the entire hotel of the infected. Alicia discovers the tide under the pier and develops a new plan to clear the hotel of all infected in one fell swoop. Alejandro gives Nick a personal trailer. Nick humbly accepts the gift. Elena brings Madison, Alicia from Trend to the lobby that connects all three parts of the hotel. They are developing a plan to send all infected people to the lobby and to the pier. Outside the hotel, Alicia and Hector lure a herd of infected inside by turning on music on Alicia's phone. Meanwhile, C. Trend and Elena open all the doors to the hotel rooms, releasing the infected from the trap. When the infected are released, Madison taps on a metal bowl, using the sound to lead them into an adjacent foyer. She is joined by Trend, Elena, Alicia and Hector, who lead herds from different parts of the hotel. When the herds meet, Madison leads the combined pack of infected to the pier. On the beach, Alicia and Hector lower the Zodiac into the water, and the party guests watch what is happening from the shore. Meanwhile, Madison leads the herd to the end of the pier, then jumps into the water, where Alicia and Hector rescue her on the Zodiac. The herd follows Madison into the water, where they are swallowed up by the tide. Nick is learning Spanish in his trailer. Luciano visits him and asks Nick about his family. He tells her that he has lost his father and that we have all lost someone. Madison's group and party guests are feasting at a large dining table in the hotel. Noticing Oscar's absence, S. Trend asks Elena where the bridal suite is located. C. Trend finds Oscar guarding the bridal suite. Oscar admits that his inanimate fiancée Jessica is inside. Trend tells Oscar that the infected Jessica is no longer his wife. "Death has separated you," he says. "Let me help you." Luciana wakes up on Nick's bed and apologizes for falling asleep. She starts to leave, but Nick stops her. They kiss. Oscar finally gives Trend the key to his room. Trend enters the room and closes the door behind him. Francisco secretly leaves the colony with his wife Anna and their little daughter Laura. She tells their daughter that it is no longer safe in the colony. Mark notices Francis' family on the road in Tijuana. Francisca tries to hide, but it's useless. Mark demands OxyContin, which he was promised in the colony. Ophelia is going to a restaurant. Inside, she kills an infected person with a hammer and indulges in memories while sitting on a terrace overlooking the ocean. In the flashback, Ophelia has lunch with her boyfriend William at the same restaurant on the ocean. William proposes to Ophelia and asks her to move to Santa Fe, where he is going to get a new job. Ophelia hesitates to leave her parents in Los Angeles, but agrees to talk to her mother. Returning to the present, Ophelia studies the map, and then pumps gasoline out of the car. 10 days have passed at the Rosarita Beach Hotel since the arrival of the Madison Group. Teaming up with the wedding guests, the survivors work together to secure the hotel and create a shelter. They strengthen the entrance gates, lay out a new garden, fish from the pier and charge the generator. Alicia takes surfing lessons from Hector and talks to him about Nick. Hector says that his own brother is also lost to him after he got involved with a gang from Tijuana. Ronaldo enters Nick's trailer to inform Luciana that Francisca and his family have escaped from the colony. Ronaldo refuses to participate in the upcoming Oxy deal without Francisco. Nick calls himself and Luciana for an exchange so that the community has water. In Elena Madison's room with Trend, Alicia and Elena decide that the generator will only work a few hours a week, enough to make ice and boil water. Trend responds to a knock on the door. Or he stabs him with a knife. "You took my daughter away from me," she says and runs away. Madison treats the wound with a Trend in bed. Oscar brings Andrea, a medical college student. Andreas examines the wound from the Trend and says that he needs a suture kit, antibiotics and erythropoietin. Elena suggests a place where such medicines can be. Nika, Luciana, inform Alejandro that Francisco has left the colony. "Not thank you, not goodbye," says Alejandro bitterly. He asks Luciana to talk to the scouts in order to raise morale after Francisco's departure. Madison tells Oscar that Eileen has to stay locked up indefinitely. She also states that henceforth anyone who harms anyone else in the hotel will be expelled. Alejandro addresses his people in the church and urges them to keep faith in him and in the safety of their home. After that, he questions Luciana's loyalty for not talking to the scouts immediately. He forbids her to Nick, to engage in drug trafficking, despite Nick's fears that Marco will come for them if he does not get his oxy. Madison, Elena and Oscar get into a van to drive to El Pelicana, a supermarket run by drug dealers. On the way, Elena explains that Hector's brother, Antonio, lives with drug dealers. She says that Hector never forgave Anthony for preferring the gang to his family. In Nick's trailer, Luciana worries about Alejandro's mental state. Nick insists that they go into drug dealing anyway, but Luciana refuses to disobey Alejandro. Madison, Elena and Oscar arrive at El Pelican with a refrigerator. Elena tells the guards that she has something for Antonio. They let Madison and Elena in. Nick again persuades Alejandro to engage in drug trafficking. Alejandro refuses and accuses Nick of not believing in him. Madison and Elena give Antonio a refrigerator full of fish and ice, and ask in exchange for medicines for the Trend. Antonio asks if they can provide more ice. Elena agrees. Antonio asks them to wait. Meanwhile, they hear Mark's screams in the office upstairs. Upstairs, Mark interrogates his prisoners, Francis and Ioana, about the location of the colony. Francisca assures Mark that someone will deliver oxy. Madison and Elena overhear Mark's interrogation. Madison asks Elena to translate for her and runs upstairs when Mark describes the rat-haired American who delivered the drugs to them. Desperate to get news about her son, Madison bursts into the office and demands to know the name of the short-haired boy. Francisca forbids Anya to answer. Mark orders them out. Antonia gives them medicine and tells them to stay away, saying that they won't stay in the supermarket for long. In the colony, Nick asks Reynold to help him in the drug trade. Reynalda agrees to accompany Nick that night. Luciana is talking to the scouts near Nick's trailer. She notices Nick's expression. He insists that everything is fine. At the hotel, Alicia covers Trend with a blanket and squeezes his wound. She explains that she helped Nick through detoxification and says that Madison still doesn't fully see her. Then do it, suggests with Trend. Nick surveys the neighborhood from the roof of the colony. Mark, who is sitting nearby, is watching Nick through binoculars. Ophelia is studying a map in her truck. She examines the rosary. In the flashback, Ophelia tells Griselda about their family. Griselda explains that she and Daniel left El Salvador to hide Ophelia from violence and bloodshed, and vows to do everything for Ophelia and Daniel. This is love, she says. Ophelia takes her hand, preferring her family to William. In the present, Ophelia kisses a rosary and hangs it on the rearview mirror. She's heading towards the USA. Madison, Elena and Oscar return to the hotel after dark. Madison runs to the generator and turns it on, lighting up the hotel sign in the hope of signaling Nick. Alicia warns Madison that people will see the sign from all sides, and accuses Madison of thinking more about Nick than about herself, even though Nick decided to run away. Travis stands on the hills overlooking the Rosarita Beach Hotel and notices the neon sign of the hotel before it goes out. Travis sets off on foot towards the hotel. A mass of desperate survivors arrive at the gates of the Rosarita Beach Hotel after noticing the neon sign that Madison had been flashing the previous night. Madison, Alicia, Elena, Oscar and Hector stand guard, refusing to let them in. Madison spots Travis in the crowd and struggles to let him in. In a recent flashback, James is writhing in agony after a farmer shot him in the leg in the barn. A farmer lies dead on the ground after being fatally shot by Chris. Travis orders Brandon, Derek, and Chris to stop James bleeding while he searches for something to sew up the wound. Travis runs to the farmhouse and finds gauze, scissors and sewing supplies. Travis stitches up the entrance wound, then turns James over to sew up the exit wound. James screams in pain. Travis assures the band that James will get better over time. Travis buries the farmer next to his family and makes a cross for the tombstone. Brendan, Derek and Chris are laughing by the campfire, eating chicken and beer. Travis checks on James and asks him to rate his pain on a scale of 1 to 10. James hesitates to admit his pain in front of his friends. Travis asks James to let him know if his condition worsens. Travis takes the unrepentant Chris aside and reproaches him for killing the farmer and having no remorse. Chris defends his actions and warns Travis to be careful when dealing with Brandon's team. "We need them," he says. In the present, Madison opens the gate for Travis, but does not let the other survivors in. TVs looks dejectedly at the ocean from the hotel balcony and asks Madison where Nick is. Madison replies that Nick has run away and then asks where Chris is. Travis is sitting on the bed, overwhelmed by emotions. "I had no choice," he says. A week has passed at the farm, and Brandon announces that they are moving to a new place. Travis claims that James is not healthy enough, but James insists that he is fine and can go on a trip. Derek says they're going to San Diego. Travis repeats that San Diego was destroyed and asks Chris to support him, but Chris says that they never actually went to San Diego. Travis finds the farmer's driver's license and carves the farmer on the tombstone with it. Chris tells him that the band is waiting for him to leave. Travis snaps at Chris and orders them to wait. Travis helps the others carry James into the truck. James winces, but says he's fine. However, when they start driving, the pain becomes unbearable. James begs Travis not to tell Brandon, and then passes out. Travis orders Brandon to stop. That evening, Travis overhears Brandon, Derek and Chris discussing James' murder. Chris points out that James is not getting better. Travis insists that he will get better over time and that they will be able to stay in the farmhouse long enough for him to recover. He grabs Chris's gun and refuses to let him hit James. Travis guards James and informs him that his friends want to kill him. James explains that they had a friend, Troy, who got infected and made them promise to kill him before he turned. However, when the time came, Troy changed his mind. James says he apologized to Troy before killing him. Travis says it's a different matter because James isn't dying, but James insists it doesn't matter as long as they think he's dying. The next morning, Chris brings Travis food to the barn and says he's afraid of Brandon and Derek. Travis assures him that everything will be fine. They're hugging. Chris takes advantage of the moment and attacks Travis, pinning him to the ground. Brandon and Derek run in. Brandon shoots James, despite the latter's pleas for mercy. Later, Brandon and Derek load the truck. Travis, who has stayed, desperately begs Chris to stay with him. Chris says that he will be better off without Travis, and claims that he has adapted to the new world, but Travis has not. He leaves the farm with Brandon and Derek. Travis buries James and then goes to the desert. Returning to the present, Travis ends his story by saying that he spent 2 days searching for the ocean before he saw the lights of the hotel. Madison assures Travis that he had no choice and reminds him that Chris is still at large. Travis regrets not telling Chris that he loved him when they broke up. Madison is holding his hand. Madison goes to the garage and finds it filled with survivors. Andres explains that they have let in 43 survivors and are examining them for infection. Behind the curtain, Alicia examines the woman for bites. Madison takes her for a walk. At the pier, Madison tells Alicia that the car accident her father got into was actually a suicide. Alicia is stunned by the news and asks what was written in the suicide note. "I love you all, that's enough," says Madison. She explains that she never told Alice and Nick because she wanted to protect Nick, who she worried might become like his father. She says the only reason she paid less attention to Alicia over the years was because she thought she was doing fine. They're hugging. That evening, a small group of survivors arrive at the hotel gates, including Brandon and Derek. Ophelia's truck breaks down in the Mexican desert. While she is checking the engine, she is attacked by a group of infected. Ophelia kills several, but when he sees the approaching herd, he runs away. In the middle of the night, Nick sneaks out of Luciana's bed and meets Reynold. They sneak into the infirmary and steal OxyContin. In the light of day, they pass through the bus from the colony to deliver Mark's drugs. Travis wakes up in Madison's hotel room. She tries to calm him down about leaving Chris and invites him to join the rest of the group downstairs. Nick and Reynaldo arrive at El Policana and tell Antonio that they need to talk to Mark. Alicia brings Travis food. He admits that Chris is sick and apologizes for not believing and protecting her when she said Chris threatened her. Nick gives Mark OxyContin, but Mark says he no longer needs their supplies. He tells Nick that he has teamed up with a more powerful gang and plans to take over the colony. Nick asks what will happen to the residents, but Mark doesn't care. To prove this, the stamp shows the executed bodies of Francis, his wife and daughter. He advises Nick to leave the colony immediately if he wants to live. Madison checks on Alicia, who is taking care of the survivors in the garage. Alicia expresses her disdain for Brandon and Derek, who loudly neglect Mexican patients and complain about Brandon's dislocated shoulder. Madison tries to calm Brandon and Derek down. She asks what happened and finds out that Brandon injured his shoulder in a car accident after they allowed their 16-year-old companion, a guy from Los Angeles, to drive without a license. They say the driver died in an accident. Madison guesses that these are the very people Chris has teamed up with. Madison tells Trent that Brandon and Derek are in the garage and that she suspects Chris is dead. Trend dissuades her from telling Travis about this, as it will destroy the only thing that makes him continue to live. This is the same hope that Trend lost after Thomas's death. Madison agrees that the news about Chris will break Travis. Nick informs Luciana that Mark's gang is going to attack the colony, and apologizes for sneaking out. In the infirmary, Nick and Luciana inform Alexander about Mark's impending attack. Nick urges Alejandra to leave the colony immediately. The discussion is interrupted by the patient who applied. The infected person attacks him, and during the ensuing scuffle, Alejandra and 2 other people get bitten. Nick kills the infected by penetrating his fingers through the eyeballs into the brain. Alejandra looks at the bite on her hand, but assures Nick and Luciana that he will be fine. Ophelia walks along the fence at the Mexican-American border and finds a hole. She's moving to America. Residents of the colony city say goodbye to infected victims of the infirmary, who offer themselves to the herd in the yard. Nick tells Luciana that he is worried about Alejandro. She assures him that Alejandro's faith will heal him. In the garage, Madison tells Brandon that Anders will need privacy to heal his shoulder. As they see Brendan and Derek off, other survivors complain that the Americans are taking advantage. The crowd becomes uncontrollable. Travis hears a commotion outside and sees a crowd of survivors chasing Madison as she escorts Brandon and Derek to the gate. He runs out into the street and demands to know where Chris is. Nick packs a bag into the trailer and tells Luciana that they have to leave, refusing to believe that Faith will protect them from Mark's gang. Alejandra comes in. Nick orders Alejandra to tell Luciana his secret. Alejandra admits that he has no immunity to infected bites, explaining that the bite on his neck was actually from a boy he was trying to save, not from an infected one. Lucian is stunned by the news. Nick begs Luciana to come with him. She refuses, saying that the colony is her home. Ophelia wanders through the desert and hides for cover when someone starts shooting at her. A man armed with a machine gun discovers her hiding behind a tree. "Welcome to America," he says. Travis and Madison take Brandon and Derek to the hotel cafe. After Andres fixed Brandon's arm, Travis asks them about Chris. They explain that they were tired, fleeing from bandits, and Chris offered to get behind the wheel of a truck so they could sleep. When he turned off the road, the truck rolled, Chris was thrown out of it, and he died from the impact. Travis asks where Chris was buried, and Derek says they pulled him out of the wrecked car and buried him under a tree. However, Travis notices a discrepancy in these 2 stories. He locks Madison and Oscar in a cafe and begins to sort things out with Brandon and Derek, demanding the truth. Brandon admits that Chris survived the accident, but suffered a leg injury, so they shot him on the road. "We should have," he begs. Enraged by his son's death, Travis brutally beats Brandon and Derek, smashing their heads and breaking their limbs. During this, Oscar tries to intervene, but Travis slams the door, causing him severe injuries. He sinks to the floor, exhausted. Travis sits in a daze on the floor of the hotel cafe after the murders of Brandon and Derek. Hector and Elena pull Travis away and take Oscar away, who is unconscious after Travis attacked him to prevent him from intervening. Madison tries to protect Travis, but Elena points out that he killed 2 men and severely wounded Oscar. Madison returns to the cafe and stabs Brandon and Derek in the head with a knife. Luciana bandages the wound from Alejandro's bite. He tells her he's dying. She orders him to lie to the townspeople to keep their faith. Trend tries to dissuade Madison from speaking out in defense of Travis, whom Elena wants to expel. Alicia and Madison decide to leave the hotel with Travis. STD refuses to join them. Madison tells Elena that they will leave with Travis in the morning and asks her to release Travis from captivity. Elena feels that she is in debt to Madison, and allows her to do so, despite Hector's reluctance. Madison enters the playroom where Travis is locked and tells him that she and Alicia will leave with him in the morning. Nick begs Luciana to leave the colony with him. "We will meet our fate," she says. "Do what you're doing, Nick." Andres treats Oscar, who is still unconscious. Alicia offers to help. He tells her that he has to remove part of Oscar's skull to reduce the swelling and orders her to leave. Alejandro warns the townspeople that people are coming to kill them, but their faith will protect them. "We will not die today," he declares. Meanwhile, Nick leaves the colony. Walking along a road in Tijuana, smeared with the blood of infected people, he notices a helicopter landing in the distance. Andres is drilling Oscar's head, and Elena and Hector are standing next to each other. That evening, Madison joins Travis on the balcony of their hotel room and assures him that Brandon and Derek deserve their fate. She says she also killed a man, Celia, to protect Nick. Oscar is dying on the operating table. Andres clenches his fist in anger. Hector sobs and shouts to Elena that Travis is safe and sound upstairs. Elena reminds him that they made a deal with Madison. Hector and Andres break into Travis' room and beat him up. Andres presents a gun to Travis' head. Alicia stabs Andres with a knife, and a fight begins. Trent snatches the gun from Andres and orders everyone out. "We need to run," he says. Travis, Madison and Alicia get into the hotel car. Trent gives the gun to Madison and stays behind. Travis accelerates and drives into the gate. Nick returns to the colony and goes to Alejandra in his trailer. Nick says he saw the helicopter land at the camp near the border, and asks Alejandra to give the residents permission to escape. Nick says he and Luciana can lead the residents north. Madison, Travis and Alicia go to El Pelican in search of Nick. They discover the bodies of Francis' family in the backyard of an empty market with bullet wounds in the head. They find Francis' driver's license with the address of the colony. The next day, Mark and the Los Hermanos bandits arrive at the colony and shoot the infected in the fenced yard before entering the premises. Mark's gang finds the city deserted and celebrates their easy victory. Alejandro watches from the shelter, then goes to the school bus in the yard. He starts the bus. Mark hears the sound of the bus and runs out into the yard. Alejandro drives the bus forward, unlocking the gap in the fence and allowing the infected to flood into the colony. Mark's gang sees the herd coming towards them and runs away. Nick Lucian is led by villagers, U.S. borders. Madison, Travis and Alicia are staying in the colony. While Madison and Travis go to the colony in search of Nick, Alicia stays in the yard and notices the school bus stopped. In the town square, Travis and Madison encounter a large herd of infected, among whom there is now Mark and his bandits. Madison and Travis find Alicia on the bus, caring for the dying Alejandro. Madison tells Alejandro she's looking for Nick. Alejandro informs Madison that Nick went to the border because he saw something, but dies before he can mention the camp. Nick, Luciana and the colonists are staying at the border checkpoint. A plume of smoke rises in the distance. Through binoculars, Nick sees the helicopter leaving the refugee camp. Suddenly, an armed survivor appears from an abandoned car and shoots at Luciana, then the entire armed group appears and opens fire on the colonists. Nick Luciana hides behind a booth, but they are captured by one of the attackers. On the bus, Alicia passes Madison, her name was Song. Madison closes Alejandro's eyes, turns his head to the side and inserts the blade, preventing him from coming to life. Armed men separate Nick and Luciana and knock them to the ground.